Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Have any of you seen any media coverage or heard any media coverage about this case? I see no hands. Ms. Wilmot, you may continue. The court is sustaining the objection to Exhibits 393 and 394.
Good morning. Say your name, please.
Yes, Lonnie Dworkin.
And Mr. Dworkin, we left off with pictures that you already have up there on your desk, Exhibits 393 and 394. We were talking about a mirror image or a copy of a hard drive. Do you remember that?
If you can refresh my memory, I don't remember the exact context.
Okay, well, we were just talking about a mirror image and things that you pulled off of that mirror image.
From where these photos came from?
Yes.
Yes, I remember that.
Okay. And the mirror image was taken of a hard drive. Do you know who that hard drive belonged to?
According to the documentation that was provided along with the hard drive, attached to the hard drive, and notes I had received separately previously from the Mesa Police Department, it appeared to belong to Jodi Arias.
Okay. And those two pictures, Exhibits 393 and 394, are those two pictures that came off of that mirror image of the hard drive?
Yes, I removed them from or I copied them off from the forensic copy, the mirror image.
All right. Okay, I want to talk to you, I want to move on a little bit and let's talk about a heliophone that you looked at.
Okay.
What is a heliophone?
A heliophone, it's actually Ocean Helio. It's a early predecessor to today's smartphones. It has a dual function keyboard, so you can slide the phone in one way and reveal a dial pad with just numerical keys, or you can slide the phone in a different way and reveal a full keyboard, QWERTY keyboard. And it had some multimedia features, had the ability to surf the web, take photographs, record audio, things of that nature.
All right. And did you look at a heliophone in this case?
Yes, Helio Ocean.
And did you actually receive the phone itself?
Yes, I did receive the phone.
Do you know when you did? When you received it?
I would have to check my records.
Okay, can you do that?
Sure.
And when you have that, I'll get it marked.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Dworkin, I'm showing you a thin mark of identification as exhibit number 424. Can you tell us when you received that heliophone?
I received the Helio phone, the Ocean Helio phone, on June 30th, 2010.
Okay, and when you received it, what'd you do with it?
I secured it in my evidence locker, and then at a later date, I processed the phone to extract information.
All right, and what do you mean process the phone? Did you have a protocol that you do?
I do. I would have to refer. I generated several reports. Each report had a different objective or scope.
Okay.
I can speak generally to my protocol and specifically some of the challenges I faced with this phone, or I can pull my reports up and talk to each one.
Let's talk about specifically, did you have any problems with the phone pulling information?
Well, I had some challenges. Generally, with cell phone forensics, we like to use forensically established protocols and tools that go along with those protocols. So there are some very popular forensic tools out in the marketplace that will allow us to attach to a cell phone and extract the information in a repeatable, very comprehensive manner. However, prior to these specialized forensic tools showing up in the industry, we used to be left with either using commercial available tools to extract data, or sometimes something as simple as screen captures. And we found that screen captures were court accepted, and so that was always the fallback method. With this specific phone, the Ocean Helio brand, there were no forensic tools, and I just recently checked, and there still are no forensic tools available that can actually attach to the phone and extract the information directly. So I was relegated to having to just take screen captures to capture the information from the phone, with the exception of, I believe, the audio. The audio I actually played on the phone and captured it over an adapter, a wire adapter that's able to plug into the headset that came with the cell phone.
Tell me, well, before we get to the audio, do you know who this phone belonged to?
I believe it belonged to Jodi Arias.
Did you get a chance to turn on the phone?
Yes, that was part of my process of extracting the information. I had to turn on the phone.
Okay, so when you turned on the phone, were there any photos that came up?
On the phone, it had a big screen on the front of the phone, and as soon as you powered on the phone, there was a photograph of Jodi Arias and another.
It goes to ownership.
Overruled.
A photo of Jodi Arias and another young lady.
Okay. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the audio. Can you explain to me what you mean by you plugged in to get the audio off of the phone?
Yes. Typically, before I examine a phone, especially one that I'm not familiar with, such as the Ocean Helio, I obtained a copy of the user manual and reviewed the user manual. Typically, the first step is to make sure that I don't change anything on the cell phone. And so I want to make sure I put the cell phone into what's called airplane mode, so it can't send or receive any wireless signals. This helps limit the amount of changes that could occur on the phone. After I did that, I had noted in the manual that I had the ability to record audio or memos, and I did locate a audio recording application on the phone. It's part of the built-in suite of applications that comes with the phone, and I was able to identify approximately 7 or 8 recordings that had been recorded over a period of time, and I was able to play those. What I did was, the phone, when I received it, it came with a little headset adapter, not actually a headset, but it had a very small microphone jack or headphone jack on the side of the cell phone. It wouldn't take a normal size a headphone jack. So with this adapter, I was able to plug it into the side of the phone and then attach that to a recorder on my computer and play the audio from the phone over that wire and record it onto my computer.
So was it recorded directly onto your computer?
Correct. I did not just play the audio over its internal speaker and then try to pick it up with a microphone. I connected the phone directly from its audio out or headphone jack directly to my computer, and I recorded the audio.
All right. And what did you do with that audio after you recorded it?
I saved it as part of an overall report and provided that the set of audio files along with other recovered items as part of a CD report.
Okay. And then you said you did screen captures?
Yes, that was the only option, to capture call logs, messages, photographs, things of that nature.
Okay, and what's a screen capture?
A screen capture is quite simply turning on the phone. Information is displayed on the phone, could be a photo, could be a call log, and I have a camera that's in a special rig, so to speak, that's suspended over the phone, and I can take photographs of each screen as I page through each screen. Okay. It's a laborious process, but...
All right, and is that what you did in this situation?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Did you also look at a Canon camera?
Yes.
Do you know when you did that?
Approximately.
Do you need to look?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I have to check another source for the record.
Okay. Let's go back a second to the Helio.
Okay.
Before you do that. When you were talking about screen captures, the screen captures, did you take screen captures or pictures of the text messages that were on the Helio?
Yes.
All right, Judge, may I approach?
May.
See where you are.
391 and 392, I'm showing you.
Okay.
Do you recognize those as the screen captures from the Helio?
Yes. These appear to be from the Helio phone.
All right. And those are just photographs of the actual phone itself.
Yes.
And what are those photographs of? Not the content, but what are those photographs of?
These are photographs of messages that were taken of the phone. So these are the textual portions of the messages.
Okay. All right. And was that something, are these things that you also took off then at the same time that you were dealing with the audio? Was this all part of your examination?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right. Let's go back to the Canon.
Okay, almost there.
Okay.
Judge, I don't mind you looking at whatever he's looking at, but if we could just add what he looked at first. I think it was a computer, and now he's looking at something else so that the record accurately reflects what he's referring to.
Yes.
Ms. Wilmot.
Judge, what did you look at first?
The first thing I looked at was a calendar I maintained for my activities. When I received the camera, I was actually in another hearing here in court, and I was called down to receive the camera from defense.
Okay.
And I came down and received the camera, and then because I did not know I was going to be receiving it, I had no paperwork with me. Normally, I have a item receipt or a chain of custody form with me when I pick up evidence items. In this case, I did not. I received the camera, and that's why I'm having to go back to my digital system, because when I got back to my lab, I checked it into my evidence locker, and for that I have a digital system, which is not on my computer, but it's on my iPhone.
Okay.
So now I'm checking my digital record back from my office
On your iPhone.
on my iPhone.
Okay.
Yes. The 15th. Okay. Okay, I'm ready with my answer.
All right. So when did you receive the Canon camera?
I have a record of checking it into my evidence locker on January 15th
Of what year?
of this year.
Okay.
And I just checked my calendar, and I see that I have my court appearance in the other case on the 15th. And so these coincide, so I believe I received it on January 15th, 2013.
All right. Have you reviewed cameras before in your experience?
Yes.
What, do you have like a standard protocol, or what is it that you do when you receive a camera?
Yes, I have a standard protocol for reviewing cameras. The first step when I receive a camera is I obtain a copy of the user manual so I can learn about some of the key features of the camera. Specifically, I'd like to know if it has any internal memory, I'd like to know if it has the ability to maintain date and time. Most digital cameras today do. I also want to make sure that, to check other features, for example, the ability to take remote photos, if it has a timer built into it, other salient features. Also, I'd like to learn what kind of memory cards does it take and how many. Some of the professional cameras, for example, can take 2 different types of memory cards, and sometimes those memory cards are 2 different types of memory cards. So I want to make sure I don't inadvertently overlook something when I examine the camera. Once I receive the evidence item, sometimes it comes in an enclosure or a carrying case. So the protocol is to inspect all the contents of the carrying case, all the pockets, hidden pockets, and so forth, and photograph and document the contents. And then I move on to the camera itself. I take photographs of the camera as well. And then based on the information I got when I reviewed the user guide, I remove the memory cards, set them aside. I take photographs of those as well. And then if I can, I'll power on the camera and note any information that's displayed on the screen, such as date and time. This is often helpful in confirming if the camera is current or not. Unfortunately, many of the criminal cases I work on, I often don't get access to the camera until maybe years after the camera had been seized and had been sitting in an evidence locker. So oftentimes the battery is dead. So if the camera doesn't have internal memory, I usually don't power on the camera to check date and time, because oftentimes the clock and calendar will have been reset to factory default anyway. So unless I'm specifically directed or there's discussion for me to do that, I did not. In this case, I noted that this is a professional DSLR, digital single reflex lens camera. It does not have internal memory for storage, and so I did not power on the camera. The camera was dead.
Okay.
The power was dead. And so then I moved my attention to the memory cards. There was one memory card. It's a compact flash 4 gigabyte memory card. I have in my report the photographs and the brand and so forth, but I don't recall offhand. I do remember it was a 4 gig. The compact flash memory card kind of looks like a 1.5 inch by 1.5 inch, very thin wafer. And I went ahead, I took that memory card and I forensically copied it and then proceeded to analyze it.
Let me ask you, what do you mean by forensically copied it?
So a memory card is very much like a hard drive. So at this point, my standard protocol for handling a memory device is used. So it's treated just like a hard drive. So the first step, of course, is to photograph the item. The second step is to select the appropriate safeguard so I can make a forensic copy of the memory card. And again, the key objective here initially during this stage is to make sure I don't risk changing any information on the memory card. So I have a special device called a write block. In fact, I have many of them, depending on the type of device I'm trying to copy information off of. I have one that's designed for USB devices, and I have a USB read-only adapter for this compact flash type of device. So I took the memory card, and I plugged it into the adapter, and I plugged this adapter into this special write block device. The write block device is made by Tableau. This is the same device that most of my peers use. Law enforcement uses the same device. And it prevents the computer from making any changes to any of the information on the card. So if I was to examine it later or make copies in the future, or law enforcement or another peer, they would come up with the exact same results without any information having been changed. Once I've attached this device, the memory card, to the write block, I then began the process of making a forensic copy using EnCase to preserve the forensic copy. And once the copy has been completed and then verified to be bit for bit exact to what was on the memory card, I can then power down the write block device and then secure the memory card.
How do you compare it bit for bit to make sure that they're the same?
The EnCase product, as others, have a great built-in feature that once it makes a forensic copy, it compares the forensic copy to the original copy using what's called an MD5 hash value, or Message Digest version number 5. This is a mathematical algorithm, very much like digital fingerprinting, if you will, that will take a stream of bits that would comprise a file or even an entire memory card, and it puts it through a formula, and the result of the formula is a unique alphanumeric 32-bit, 32-character code. And it's, when I say alphanumeric, it would be made up of numbers and letters. If a single bit was to change between when I copied it and the original, the hash values would not match. And I would get a warning from the system saying errors. And it would tell me the evidence hash value, and it would show me the copied hash value. And this is a standard protocol. It's built into the tool. When I receive hard drives, forensic copies of hard drives and so forth, it's customary. I'll also receive from the police their MD5 hash reports. And this is also one of the things that I do when I receive evidence or I am about to re-examine evidence. For example, I always revalidate the evidence file to make sure nothing has changed, that these hash values are always the same.
Okay. Did you have any problem with hash values with the Canon camera?
No, I did not.
All right. And what were you asked to do with this Canon camera?
I was asked to locate images and produce the images that I can recover from both allocated and unallocated space. Or in other words, images or photographs that you can easily see using the camera or a computer, as well as deleted images.
Are the deleted images when you talk about unallocated space?
Correct. Unallocated space and deleted images are the same for our discussion.
Okay. And so were you able to pull photos off of this camera?
Yes.
Did you have an understanding that, did you pick up this camera actually from this courtroom?
Yes.
Is it your understanding that it was seized from Mesa PD?
Objection. You're saying?
Not for an expert.
Approach.
Yes. All right, Mr. Dworkin, is it your understanding that this camera came from the Mesa Police Department?
Yes. When I received
All right, is exhibit number 364, is that what you picked up?
Yes,
Okay,
this is the
tell-
shopping bag.
All right, I'm sorry I interrupted you. What is it?
This is the shopping bag I picked up.
Okay.
Inside the camera case, and inside the camera case is a Canon DSLR.
Okay, and how is it that you know that it was something that was seized by Mesa Police Department?
Well, there are markings on the bag. It's printed here. It's in the upper right-hand corner of the bag. It's been formally printed. It says Mesa Police Department Property and Evidence Package. And then there are other formal markings here regarding case, item, date of impound, and so forth. At the bottom, the note says evidence is circled as what this pertains to. And then there are additional markings on the bag. Certainly there's this evidence, this exhibit number, 364 is attached to it, as well as there's a barcode system that's attached to it, identifying it as a digital camera. And it also has a unique property ID and case reference number attached to it. The bag itself, sorry about the noise. The bag itself, you may notice, has hand notes that appear to be signatures and dates. And I know from my experience, having worked with Mesa Police Department before and received evidence, it's a common practice that when they open an evidence bag, whether it's actually a shopping bag or maybe something a little smaller, the person opening it and responsible for it will typically sign their name on it and put the date of when they accessed that evidence item. I've participated in that process with them many times. And so I see that there are numerous markings around the bag. I don't recognize the signatures, but I'm sure we might be able to figure out who had access.
Okay. And on the front of the bag, does it have any information of when it was originally seized?
It has a date of impounding, which is actually different than necessarily seizing, I believe. Impounding is when it's secured into their evidence locker.
What's that date?
It's covered by the, can I remove the exhibit tag?
Judge Mahey? Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, date of impound is July 21st, 2008.
Okay, thank you. All right. And is it your understanding that this camera belonged to Miss Arias?
That is my understanding, yes.
All right. Judge, at this point, defense moves to introduce exhibit number 364 into evidence.
364 is admitted.
Okay. Do you want me to take that back? You talked about there being a memory card that was associated with this Canon camera.
Yes,
All right, were you able to pull photos off of that memory card?
yes,
You talked about allocated, is it unallocated is deleted.
yes. We can just refer to it as active files and deleted files.
Okay, so out of those photos, Judge, may I approach? I'm showing you what's been marked for exhibits 413, 415, 413, 14, 15, and 417. And do you recognize those photos as being pulled from the Canon?
Yes, I recognize these.
And can you turn the photo over? There's some information on the back of each photo.
Yeah,
Is that EXIF information?
Judge, if you could at least hold them down so that the jury can see them until.
Is that EXIF information?
no. This information appears to be file system information.
Oh, okay. Can you
The
look at some?
difference is file information, the camera itself, when it takes a photograph, a digital camera takes a photograph, it embeds information into the photograph itself about the cameras and the camera settings so that we could look at the digital file that's built into the photograph using the appropriate tools. For example, if you use Photoshop, it's a very popular product, or in the Windows operating system or in the Macintosh operating system. You can ask about properties of a photo. Oftentimes, it'll show you at least the basic exchange information, or what we call EXIF information. That information would include things such as make and model of the camera, date and time the picture was taken and digitized and saved. It would also contain possibly information about camera settings, focal length, shutter speed, aperture, and in some of the cameras that have built-in GPS or global positioning capabilities, it might actually include the location the photograph was taken. File system data is a little bit different. File system data has to do with managing the photograph on the actual memory card or a hard drive for that matter. It captures the date and time the photograph was saved or moved or copied to its current location, and salient information as well. Oftentimes on a camera memory card, the file system create date, for example, will be the same as the digitized date that's captured as part of the EXIF information. This information talks about file create and last written information, and so this would indicate to me that this is file system information. It's not saying date digitized, things of that nature, which would lead me to believe it would be EXIF information.
Okay, can you flip through on, and tell us, can you look at exhibit number 413? And be careful not to pull the photo up.
Yes.
Could you move your microphone back? The long one. Yes, move it back a little bit. Thank you.
All right, so 413, does that have file system information on it?
Yes.
All right, and can you look at 414? Does that have file system information?
No.
What does that, oh, does that have a blank piece of paper also stapled to the back? One of them does. In between the exhibit number and the photo itself?
It's nothing on here.
Tish may approach.
You may.
Thank you.
So does 414 have file system information on it?
Yes.
All right. And what about 415?
Yes.
And 417?
Yes.
All right.
Let me revise that last response.
Sure.
417 actually has EXIF information on it, not file system information. Well, it has both, actually. It has file system information and EXIF information.
Okay. And the EXIF information just provides us more information than the file system?
It may provide the same, well, it provides different information. Oftentimes, the basic information is the same.
Okay.
So with 417, I recognize this format, the way the information is presented. This is typical from an ENCASE extraction. And I see that we have file system information included along with the EXIF information.
All right. And with regard to these photographs, 413, 414, 415, and 417, are these all photos that you recognize that you took off of the Canon camera? The external drive, I mean?
These all appear to be images I recall seeing on the memory card I had removed from that Canon camera.
And our defense would move in exhibits 413, 414, 415, and 417.
They haven't provided me a copy, and I haven't seen them in court, so perhaps you would.
Yes.
Actually, Judge, we did provide a copy.
Why don't you show the actual exhibits to Mr. Martinez?
Objection as relevance as to all of them, and objection as to relevance and hearsay as to exhibit 417.
You may approach. Please remember the admonition. We'll bring you back shortly. Please be seated. Yes, we'll wait for Ms. Arias to return. While we're waiting for show that the defendant has returned and all counsel are present, the jury is not present. The objection.
Judge, with regard to exhibit number 414, it's a picture of the defendant with a black dog. The state fails to see how that is relevant. I understand that there may be some information as to when this was taken, although I don't see it has some information as to when the file was created and the date that these were created. Again, without the defendant herself taking the stand and providing why this is relevant, the state would object. Additionally, the fact that she's with this what appears to be very cute black dog, I think that under 401, 402, and 403 analysis, it would be unduly prejudicial. Again, we're here on a murder case, and the fact that they're presenting her hugging a dog is irrelevant. Then there's exhibit number 415. It shows the defendant with another individual, a female, wearing a yellow top, and it does have some information on it. Again, this was about the same time, but it shows the defendant smiling, and it shows this other person smiling. Again, this is irrelevant, again, until the defendant takes a stand. Under 401, 402, and 403, it's also unduly prejudicial. It shows her as a happy-go-lucky kind of person, and I don't see how that's relevant to the killing. There's a picture, exhibit number 413 of the defendant with another female who has colored her hair red. They both are smiling. Again, it has some information in the back, but the fact that they're smiling and they have a red background, there is no relevance that has been shown at this time. Again, we can't forget that we're here on a murder case, not to show that the defendant was happy with this other young female, whoever that may be. Exhibit 417 is a top that says Travis Alexander's. It's kind of like a sweat top color. And then there's some pink underwear that says Travis's, apostrophe S. We know that these photographs were taken by someone who laid these items out on the bed. And it appears that they were taken on July 12th, or it says date and time of original, July 12th, it's saying, of 2008, and then it says date and time digitized, July 12th of 2008. These were taken after the victim after the defendant killed the victim. So again, the date is problematic in terms of relevance. These were created afterwards. It appears that she did this sort of as an homage to the victim shortly before she was arrested. So unless there's that sort of foundation as to when these were created, the items here, also, it's irrelevant that the defendant may have chosen to take photographs of some underwear and a top that maybe she put together sometime after he was killed.
Ms. Wilmot?
Judge, with regard to exhibits 413, 414, and 415, these are all photos of Miss Arias that are taken that show very clear pictures of the color of her hair. These photos were all taken, let's see, let me be specific. Exhibit number 414, the information of when this photo was taken was on May 15th of 2008. Exhibit number 415, the information is that it was taken on May 17th of 2008. And exhibit number 413, the information is that it was created on May 10th of 2008. The relevance of these photos has been based on what the state's case presented, the fact that she supposedly had blonde hair when she went to go rent a car on June 2nd of 2008, and then magically had brown hair when she was taken, when Travis took photos of her on his bed on June 4th. Somehow implying that she was maybe trying to do something incognito. In reality, Judge, her hair had been brown for quite some months, and specifically in exhibit number 414, you can see, with the cute dog, you can see the fact that she has blonde streaks in her hair in the front, which maybe might lead someone to believe that she had blonde hair, but you can also see the back of her hair, which is brown. In the other photos, you can see that she clearly has brown hair with some blonde highlights in them. They're all dated to a time of May, which is mainly that, so the photos go to show the relevance that she had brown hair prior to renting a car, just like she had brown hair on June 4th. With regard to exhibit number 417, it's a photo of the t-shirt that says Travis Alexander's in the possessive form, and then underwear that says Travis's in the possessive form. The relevance of this, Judge, is the fact that this will be relied on by our experts when they're discussing how Travis treated Jodi and what type of relationship they have. The possessiveness of this relationship, the controlling nature of this relationship, these photos just go to demonstrate that and what that does to a woman in particular with a battered women's defense and self-defense, and that's why this photo 417 is relevant. Additionally, Judge, with regard to prejudice to the state's duty is to seek justice and not a conviction. Therefore, their prejudice is not the same as when we talk about overly prejudice to the defense. So none of these things are overly prejudiced to the state. None of them, in fact, it's the state who put them into play when the state claims that she had blonde hair on June 3rd.
Anything else from the state?
I think the testimony was from the individual that the rental car indicated that she had blonde hair. The fact that her hair on the 15th, 17th, or the 10th may have been brown doesn't mean she didn't dye it some color before she went to meet Mr. Alexander and then dyed it afterwards. To me, again, that's still not relevant. And the one with the dog, it's so unduly prejudicial. The other one with her laughing with her friend, and the other photograph, they're just unduly prejudicial, and I would ask that they not be admitted at this time. Should the defendant take the stand and provide some other reasoning, of course, we can revisit it at that time.
All right, the objections overruled. Exhibits 413, 14, 15, and 417 will be admitted.
Thank you, Judge.
All right, let's bring the jury back in.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Exhibits 413, 414, 415, and 417 are admitted. You may continue.
Thank you, Judge. All right, Mr. Dworkin, I'm showing you what's been admitted I'll show you in a second. What's been admitted as exhibit number 413. Okay. All right. You see exhibit 413 on your screen?
Yes.
And as far as you can tell, is this a picture? Is one of the women in the picture, is that Jodi Arias?
Yes.
All right. And I'm going to flip to the back side of this exhibit. All right. Is that the file information you were talking about?
Yes.
Can you tell us what that tells? What does that say? What does it tell us?
That tells us that the 238, if this was taken from my in-case report, the 238 would tell me that this was file number 238 that was identified by the in-case forensic report. The file name is img_0720.jpg. It says is deleted. There's actually no note after is deleted, so it doesn't mean this file was actually deleted. If this file was deleted, I would expect to see a little dot or a date next to is deleted. So this is just a placeholder to indicate that if it was deleted, we'd see a date there, possibly. Last access means the last time the file was accessed by the operating system, or the file system, I should say. In this case, it's 5/10/2008. We have a file create date, the date the file arrived in its current location on the file system. We have a last written date of 5/10/2008, which also coincides with the file create date and the last access date.
What does last written mean?
Means the last time the file was updated in the file system. There's a number of fields that could be updated in the file system, and this reflects the last time that an update regarding this file has occurred.
Okay, so in general layman terms, does that mean that this photo was taken on May 10th, 2008? Can you say that?
Well, knowing that this came from the compact flash memory card, knowing that we have the last access date, file, and last written dates all match, it appears that the file had arrived on the memory card on 5/10/2008. If we had EXIF data, I could confirm it was actually taken on the state, but absence of that, it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that it was taken on that date. It is possible it could have been added, but we have a sequence of images, I'm sure, that if we were to look at the full report, we would see this in line with other images and sequential numbering with dates. So there's ways to verify it.
Okay, so in other words, do we know that what you say, this file arrived on the flash drive on May 10th, 2008?
Right, well, remember,
Okay.
a flash card, a flash memory device is very much like a hard drive and respects the same file system attributes. So if a file is moved or copied to the memory card via a adapter from a computer, it would have a create last access date. Also, for the camera, takes a picture and creates the image on the memory card. It too will have the same information. So generally, you don't see people saving images to memory cards and cameras. Generally, they're removed. And that's why I always like to look at the EXIF data, because that's actually built into the file itself. And although it can be manipulated, generally it's not. And that just serves as additional confirmation as to the digitized date and time.
Okay, and in this photograph, can you tell us what color Miss Arias's hair is?
Projection like foundation, I'm not sure it's an extra up here. It speaks for itself.
Well, because it speaks for itself, I think that he can.
Overruled, you may answer.
Her hair appears to be brown.
Okay. And I'm showing you exhibit number 414. All right, and is this a photo of Miss Arias?
Yes.
And let's look to the back. This is some more file system information. Does that tell us that this file was arrived on the flash card, right? Flash card?
Yes.
Okay, flash card on May 15th of 2008.
Correct.
All right. And in this photograph, can you see, I'm not sure on your screen or maybe behind you, do you see the color of her hair?
Yes.
Does it have two different colors?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
Yes.
Okay. And in the front, what color does it appear to you?
It appears to be a blondish color,
And in the back?
a brownish color.
All right. All right, I'm showing you exhibit number 415. Is that a picture of Miss Arias?
Yes.
Okay, and we'll flip it around. When did this file arrive on the flash card?
5/17/2008.
Okay. All right, and I'm showing you exhibit number 417. Now, this photo does not have a picture of Miss Arias in it, is that right?
That is correct.
Can you tell what's in this photograph?
It appears to be a pair of women's panties, pink in color, and a gray t-shirt.
Sorry, go ahead.
The gray t-shirt has Travis Alexander's with a possessive, as a possessive statement, and then we have Travis's with a possessive statement also on the panties.
All right, and let's turn this over. Now, this looks more extensive. Is this what you refer to as EXIF data?
Yes.
Okay.
The more specifically, the first the first 9 lines, starting from the number 943, comma.
Yes.
And if we count down 9 lines down to where, just before it says make canon, between that, those two, the first line and the 9th line, that's typically information I would get from the file or the file system.
Okay.
For example, we have an example of hash value. That's something that's calculated by my forensic computer and software. That's actually not in the file system, but that information generally comes from the file system. Everything from make Canon, model Canon on down is EXIF information is actually extracted from within the photograph itself.
All right. And so because we have the more detailed EXIF information, can you tell us when this photo was actually taken for sure?
I can tell you what information is here to indicate when it was taken. We
Okay.
have about 3/4 of the way down. Is this working? Oh, yeah. Oops.
Yeah, you can use that
Sorry.
screen.
So right here, sorry about that mess. We have date time digitized. That's when the image is taken and then saved to the memory card. So here we see we have 2008, we have July 12th, and we have a time of 10/25/15. So this is when it was taken by the camera and then saved to the memory card. That's why we have a digitized date and we have an original date.
All right. And then if you look up at the top, what we were looking at before, the file created and last written?
Yes, we see we have the same date and time. They're off about a second, which is reasonable because there can be a bit of a lag time, especially with digital cameras, from when the photo is taken and buffered. It means temporarily stored until it's actually saved to the memory card. So within a second, that's certainly reasonable.
Okay, so within a second, this photograph was taken and then arrived at the flash card within a second.
Correct. This all happens automatically from when the user pushes the button to take the picture, and then the rest of the process is automatic.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dworkin.
Cross-examination.
Sir, on Thursday, when we left off, we were talking about a number of computers. The first one that you talked about was this computer that belonged to Travis Alexander, or you gave the indication that that was Travis Alexander's, correct?
Yes,
That was the Presario Compact or something like that?
I believe so. I can check my notes.
That's okay. And with regard to that particular computer, that wasn't damaged at all, was it?
No, it was not.
And then you talked about another item that was damaged though, right?
Yes,
And they are separate and distinct items, aren't they?
that's true.
And just for the sake of this inquiry here, the victim's computer, there was no damage to it, correct?
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, you examined it, right?
I didn't examine the physical computer. I was only provided forensic copies of the hard drives, of all of the computers.
Any indication in the hard drives that there were any damage to it?
No, the police were fairly diligent for Mesa in noting when they had issues making forensic copies, also making notes if the particular evidence item was not operable or they had issues. And so there were no comments regarding either of those evidence items.
And with regard to Exhibit 419, that's a bit of a history of that computer, the victim's computer, back on June 4th of 2008, right?
Yes, internet history.
And you talked a little bit about this, right?
Yes.
And you needed it to refresh your recollection back then as to what was going on with this computer, where the user was going, that sort of thing, right?
Yes.
And this was the victim's computer, right?
Yes.
I move for the admission of Exhibit 419.
Any objection? Is admitted.
So if we take a look at this, Exhibit 419, let's start at the top. And this is the one that you also told me had the name, or told us that it had the name of Deanna Reed, correct?
Yes.
But it also had the name of Travis Alexander associated with it, right?
Correct.
And what we're looking at here is that somebody, the first entry there, somebody is going on YouTube, correct?
Correct.
And we know that from the first line, right?
Yes, we see that we have youtube.com, and we have the note watch with a question mark, which is a typical notation when someone's going to watch a video, and you can actually trace back the video.
Right. And what they were looking for was this daft bodies, harder, better, faster, stronger, right?
Correct, that was the title.
And daft bodies is a rock group, right?
That I don't know.
Well, don't you think that you should have gone on? Because this sort of seems a little bit salacious, doesn't it? That looks like it may be porn, doesn't it?
It potentially may or may not be.
Right. But if I told you that Daft Bodies was nothing more than a rock group, would you disagree with me?
Objection, speculation, knowledge.
Overruled, you may answer.
Can you ask the question again?
Would you disagree with me if I told you that Daft Bodies was a rock group?
I have no way of agreeing or disagreeing because I have no knowledge of it.
Okay, so you wouldn't disagree with me then.
I wouldn't either way.
And Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, do you know that that's the name of a song that this group has?
Again, I have no knowledge of this particular video or group or...
Well, you know that this, you know what the issues in this case were, right?
Yes.
In terms of the broken hard drive, the mirror image, you looked for things there, right? You knew what you were looking for there, right?
Well, I understand that someone was murdered, but beyond that, I'm not sure I follow.
Well, you picked certain photographs from the other hard drive that was broken, didn't you?
No, I provide defense.
Did you print out
Reports.
did you print out those photographs, yes or no?
I provided a full report.
There's speculation and knowledge as to which photographs that the state's discussing.
Sustained.
With regard to the photographs that we were talking about Thursday, did you print those photographs, yes or no?
No, I did not print those photographs.
So you could have gone to YouTube to check on this Daft Bodies, Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, couldn't you?
I could have, yes.
Now, then we have underneath the history of it, right? And this is, the history of this was on June 4th, 2008 at 4:08 in the morning, right?
Correct.
And with regard to that, this talks about, again, the same thing. You see YouTube, drunk, Daft Punk, harder, bodies, faster, stronger, drunk, right?
Correct.
If I told you that that was nothing more than three people dancing around, acting drunk to this particular song with something on their head, would you have any way of disputing that?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled, you may answer yes or no.
At this point, no.
Judge, may we approach?
You may. Continue.
And if we continue on, we then have one at 4:11. You see it's the same thing there. Daft hands, harder, better.
I don't know what the content actually is because, again, like the others, I've not actually made an effort to look at what the content was. Again, these are just a few of thousands of entries, over almost 100,000 entries. So there's no way I can select specific ones and be knowledgeable about all 100,000.
I understand that you can't be knowledgeable over 100,000, but with regard to exhibit number 419, that's not 100,000, is it?
You are correct.
These are very specific entries, right?
Yes.
And you were asked about them on Thursday, right?
For the first time, yes.
You were asked about them Thursday, yes or no, sir?
Yes.
And with regard to saying asked about them the first time, is there any prohibition that you know of that prevents defense counsel from asking you something before you come to court?
Objection, Your Honor, relevant. Improper.
Is there?
No.
So if we then take a look at the entry at the top, we're again talking about this. The time is June 4th, 2008 at 4:15 in the morning, right?
Correct.
And it's again the same YouTube, daft hands, double speed, faster, better. Do you have any way of knowing of whether or not that's just the video speeded up?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
In other words, would they be that the people that are in the video are moving faster than the previous video?
Objection, Judge, same objection as before. This specificity.
Overruled, you mean?
I'm not sure I understand the nature of the question.
In other words, in terms of this particular entry here, when it talks about faster, better, double speed, you don't know what double speed means, do you?
I don't know what anything about this video contains,
Right,
and I
but-
can't determine it based just merely on the title, because I know from my experience.
So the answer
I
is you
see
don't
this.
know, correct?
That is correct.
But this is a report that you provided, correct?
Yes.
And you created this report, correct?
Yes, I did.
And that involved the computer that we've been calling the victim's computer, correct?
Correct.
With regard to that computer, did you check to see whether or not there were any images at all of women's breasts in the victim's computer?
Not specifically. No, I did not.
Generally, did you do that?
No, not generally.
Did you even look to see if there were any photographs of any women's breasts on there?
Not specifically, no.
As you sit here today, can you tell us that there were any images of women's breasts in that computer?
Objection, speculation. He just said he didn't look for him.
Overruled, you may answer.
I don't have that knowledge because I wasn't tasked to do that.
Right, but the bottom line is, as you sit here, you can't tell us that there is because you didn't look, right?
Correct.
And you can't tell us that there are any images whatsoever of any nude women, whether it's breast or otherwise, right?
Not without reviewing my notes. I would
Well-
have to review my notes. If you'd like, I could.
You're now telling me that this may be in your notes, and before you told me that you didn't review the data. Which one is it?
When I'm asked to provide,
Sir, my answer is
Information.
which one is it? Not a long answer, if you don't mind.
can
Which
you,
one is it?
which one, can you re-ask the question?
Sure. Is it that you didn't look in this computer for any nudes, or is it that there weren't any?
I recall there was some pornography on the computer. I don't recall if they were specifically just women's breasts or if there was more pornography than that or of a different nature of
Do
pornography.
you remember that we had an interview about this issue, that we discussed it?
I remember we did have an interview a couple of years ago, yes.
And isn't it true that at that time you told me that there was no pornography?
If I said that at that time, then I would stand by that statement. I just don't have the specific knowledge at this time.
All right. So you don't have any knowledge at all at this time, is what you're trying to tell me?
Correct.
Okay. The hard drive, not the one that was broken, right? Now I want to talk about that. That one you linked up to the defendant, Jodi Arias, correct?
Yes.
So when we talk about that, let's talk about that as the defendant's hard drive. With regard to that, you said it was damaged, right?
Yes.
You don't know who damaged it, right?
Correct.
You don't know if it was the defendant who damaged it, right?
I don't know who damaged it.
And you don't know what kind of damage it sustained, right?
Correct.
And you don't know, do you know that it was seized up in Wairika, or do you even know, do your records reflect any of that? You know where it was taken from by the police. You said you reviewed the report. Isn't it true that that was seized by the police in Wairika?
It's possible it's in the notes. It's been so many years since I reviewed it. I don't
Do you
recall.
have those notes with you?
I do not have the police notes with me. I do know that it was seized at some point by Mesa Police Department, and they had made some notes about not being able to make a forensic copy of it at the time.
Right.
And then at a later date, they were able to provide a forensic copy of what they were able to have recovered.
And they provided you a report first of what they were able to recover, correct?
I never received a police report from what they were able to recover.
You weren't shown a copy of their forensic report?
I don't believe so. I believe I just received a NCASE copy or forensic copy of the recovered sectors.
We keep talking about mirror image, that, and then we're talking about an NCASE report. What you received, was that a mirror image of what was on that hard drive, or was it something else?
It was a copy from the Mesa Police Department of what they were able to copy from that hard drive. It was an exact copy or forensic copy.
So, just so that we're clear, because it appears that there's some terms going on, NCASE, what does that have to do with the mirror image that you received? Let me ask, aren't they the same thing, or are they different?
NCASE is just a tool that has multiple functions. One of the functions is it has the ability to make a forensic copy. We refer to the forensic copy as an E01 or E01 copy. What I received from the police department was the E01 or NCASE copy they produced using NCASE.
So it was something, NCASE was used to generate what was given to you, right?
Correct.
And then when you went to look at it, you also used NCASE, correct?
Correct.
And then you were able to view whatever the images were that were on there, right?
Yes.
Then some of the images that you were able to access, for example, one of them is 417. Do you see this one?
Objection. Are we still talking about the hard drive?
No, we're not. You also, sir, in terms of seizing items, the broken one, the defendant's, that produced some photographs, right?
I was able to recover photographs from there.
We then have the camera that we've been talking about, the Canon camera, right?
Yes.
And that Canon camera also belonged to the defendant, right?
I believe so, yes.
So of all the three things that we have here, the first one was the victim's, right?
I'm confused. The first one, what?
The compact presario that we talked about. That was the victim's, right?
Okay, yes.
The other two items belong to the defendant, right?
The broken hard drive and the camera.
All right. And with regard to the Canon camera, there are some photographs that were taken, and this is one of them, right?
Yes.
And this one says Travis Alexander's, the possessive, on the shirt, right?
Correct.
And then it says Travis's on the shorts, right?
Correct.
They looked a little bit posed there, don't they?
Yes.
And do you know the occasion or the reason why they're posed in that fashion?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled, you may answer yes or no.
I don't know the context in which this photo was taken.
And do you even know who took it?
I do not.
There's something here in the corner. Do you know what that is?
I do not.
There's also something on the right corner. Do you know what that is?
I do not.
But we do know with regard to this one, which is Exhibit 417, that if the data is correct, it was taken on July 12th of 2008, right?
Yes.
And July 12th of 2008 is after June 4th of 2008, right?
Yes.
And you do not know how these were created. In other words, you don't know who, for example, put Travis Alexander on that shirt, right?
Correct.
And Travis's, you don't know who did that, right?
Correct.
And again, with regard to this particular date of July 12th of 2008, we do know that July 15th of 2008 comes after this particular date of July 12th of 2008, right?
Yes.
Sir, You're really not an expert on hair, are you?
I've been asked for my opinion in the past on body features, including hair,
Okay.
but as a advertised expert on hair specifically, no.
So with regard to exhibit number 413, when you were asked about hair color and that sort of thing, were you just giving us the same opinion that anybody in this courtroom would have given us?
Yes.
So it's not that you're any better or any worse than people here, right?
Probably not.
And with regard to this particular color of hair, do you know whether or not the day before this person on the right had that hair color? Do you know when that color was put on there?
There's no way I could know.
There's no way anybody could know that, right?
I don't believe so.
With regard to exhibit number 414, what's the name of the dog?
I do not know.
And exhibit number 415, any idea who this person is?
I do not know.
Any idea why the occasion was that this was taken?
I do not.
And in terms of the hair, do you know when this hair color was applied to the defendant?
No, I don't.
If we then take a look at this one, it's exhibit 414. It does seem that whatever hair color is there, it's throughout. In other words, it's not showing any roots, right?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
This particular angle is a little difficult to make that determination only because it's just one sample photograph. I'd like to see additional photographs or see if there are other additional photographs with it.
I'm asking you about this photograph, and I'm asking you to focus right here on the forehead. You see any different colored roots there?
I can't make that.
Objection, judge, speculation as to what the color of the hair is without dye. It might be the same color, therefore there would be no roots.
Council approach. May continue.
See the forehead there?
Yes.
What's the color of the hair closest to the forehead?
I can't make a determination, and the reason for that is
Thank you.
we're looking at a picture of
Sir,
a picture.
excuse me. I asked you whether or not you could make out the color. Is the answer no?
No one could.
I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Redirect.
Judge, may I ask a question so that I don't have to recall them later?
Yes, you may.
So take a look at these photographs and please don't demonstrate them to anybody. Exhibits 425 to 427. Take a look at this.
Okay, I viewed them.
These photographs, did they also come from the hard drive that was broken?
I do not know.
You didn't review all of it? Or how is it that you recognize some photographs but not others?
The photographs that I was asked to identify previously were shown to me by counsel prior to my coming into the courtroom, and I was able to refer to my reports and identify them.
All right.
These have not been shown before and not been asked to identify before.
Right. Okay, now with that. I don't have any other questions.
Ms. Wilmot, do you have an extensive redirect? Or is it brief?
Judge, it's fairly, it may take longer than 5 minutes or 4 now.
All right, we'll take the noon recess at this time. Ladies and gentlemen, please be back in the designated area at 1:25, and we will start promptly at 1:30. Please remember the admonition, you are excused. Have a nice lunch.
Thank you, Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Dworkin.
Good afternoon.
I just have just a few questions, I think, for you with regard to Exhibit 419, and that's the exhibit of the records. .419, that's the exhibit of the history, the internet history that you created on Mr. Alexander's computer, or that you looked at on Mr. Alexander's computer.
Yes.
Is that right? All right. And this was, you said, these entries that we specifically looked at were somewhere between 4 in the morning to 4:35 in the morning?
Yes.
Were there many more entries than that?
In that time frame or in total?
No, total. At the internet history that you looked at.
There were approximately almost 100,000, like 990. It was like 99,000 plus entries.
Okay, and these ones that we specifically looked at in Exhibit 419 had to do with the timing of around 4 or 4:30 in the morning, is that right?
Correct.
Were you asked to ever look at any of the YouTube videos?
No.
You would ask some questions about a mirror image, the hard drive?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have access to the actual hard drive itself?
Which hard drive are you referring to?
Miss Arias's, the broken one.
The broken one, yes?
Okay. Did you have access to the broken hard drive?
Yes, I had the forensic copy of the broken hard drive.
Did you actually see the broken hard drive also?
Yes.
Okay. And when you got a mirror image of that broken hard drive, is that just something that you can just kind of plug into a computer and any one of us can look at what's on it?
The forensic copy is in a forensic format, so you would need to have a viewer that can view that type of format or the forensic tool that created it.
So, and what kind of viewer did you have?
I have the forensic tool that has a built-in ability to view it called NCase.
Okay. So is that something that you had to use on the mirror image before you can pull up any of these images?
Yes.
And about how many images or photos were contained on that mirror image of Miss Arias's hard drive?
I'd have to check my record. I don't know that offhand.
Okay. Even about numbers?
I don't know offhand.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can I check?
Sure. And let us know what you're referring to.
I'd have to load up one of my CDs. I don't have it preloaded on the computer.
All right, well,
I'd have to load up one of my CDs. I don't have it preloaded on the computer.
let me ask you this way. When you used EnCase, did you come up with around over 100 different files?
When I used EnCase,
When you used EnCase on the mirror image?
of the broken hard drive, I remember there was a very large number, literally thousands of images and files that we recovered.
Okay.
I just can't give you the exact number right now.
That's okay. That's really my question. So there was thousands of images?
But yes, there were thousands of them. It took days to recover the information. I had to run recovery scripts for quite some time.
When you say days, do you mean, did you leave the EnCase or the recovery program running for days?
Yes.
And is that in order to help it retrieve everything off of the mirror image?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Judge. Nothing further.
Looks like we have one question from a juror, perhaps two. Counsel, please approach. Mr. Dworkin, a juror has some questions for you. Are date and time stamps on photos taken by digital cameras able to be manually changed and/or manipulated?
Yes.
Could that occur before a photo is taken or after a photo is taken?
The file wouldn't have existed prior to the photo being taken, so you couldn't do it before. The photo or the file would actually have to exist and then go in after the fact and then manipulate it. The only other way to do that would, of course, would be to change the date-time setting in the camera itself.
Any other questions from the jury? Ms. Wilmot, follow up?
Thank you. Does that apply to EXIF information as well?
Yes, if the camera's date, you're referring to my comment about the camera's date and time?
Yes.
Yes, if the date and time in the camera is changed, the EXIF can only contain the information that the camera has access to. So if the camera thinks it's a particular date and time, that's what's going to be incorporated in the EXIF data and would also most likely be reflected in the file system data as well.
And when were you able to turn on this Canon camera?
I may have been able to turn it on. I did not attempt to because I knew that the camera had been seized and in storage for quite a long time. And usually the date time information is lost. And since there wasn't a specific reason to do it at the time, I wasn't asked to, and I did not.
And did you see any evidence of manipulation of time and date stamps?
No, nothing struck me as being out of order. I did do an inspection, a casual or informal inspection. While I looked at the EXIF data, I also looked at the file system data to see if they were out of alignment, and they all seemed to match. So I didn't find anything out of the ordinary or unusual.
All right, thank you. Nothing further, Judge.
Mr. Martinez?
Sir, with regard to exhibit number 413, which is one of the photographs, is it possible that, for example, this particular photograph, that it was taken in 2007 and then uploaded or downloaded or whatever it is that one does onto the camera in 2008?
Anything's possible.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the jury? Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Okay.
You may call your next witness.
Thank you. I'm going to call Bryan Aumeister.
Judge, maybe he is subject to recall. Can we keep him under the subpoena, please?
Yes, sir, Mr. Dworkin, you are still under subpoena.
It's Bryan, B-R-Y-A-N, Neumeister, N-E-U-M-E-I-S-T-E-R.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Please walk right around here and have a seat. You may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Could you tell us your name, please?
It's Bryan Neumeister, B-R-Y-A-N, N-E-U-M-E-I-S-T-E-R. I'm with USA Forensic.
And what is USA Forensic? What do you do?
We do state-of-the-art audio and video enhancement for trials and for military other uses.
How long have you been doing that type of work?
I've been working professionally with audio and video for 32 years.
And so what kind of experience do you have in order to forensically do what you do now?
I'm a certified forensic expert in military, federal, state, civil, and aviation courts. I work with the United States District Courts as a contracted technical expert. I worked with the United States Grand Jury as a contracted technical expert.
Mr. Neumeister, let me stop you right there. Are you referring to something?
Pardon?
Are you referring to something as you're telling us?
Yes, I'm just grabbing some highlights off a CV. It makes it easier to remember.
Okay. Could I get that marked? Just
Sure.
so we know what you're looking at.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you. So you were telling us,
Again,
Your
I work
experience.
with the United States District Courts as a contracted technical expert, United States Grand Jury contracted technical expert, U.S. Department of Justice contracted technical expert, a member, and I say I am or have been, and the reason I say that, I never know if the dues are paid up this early in the year, but the Audio Engineering Society, the American College of Forensic Experts, or actually the American College of Forensic Examiners, the American College of Forensic Examiners International, the American Board of Recorded Evidence. I work also with the Department of Defense and contractors on classified and unclassified forensic materials, the Department of Energy, a number of state and local law enforcement agencies. Actually, I'm working with all three agencies involved in this case right now. On different cases, I'm working with the prosecution on a number of other cases. I'm working with your firm, also with the Public Defender's Office, and also with, I believe, Mesa Police is involved in this too. I'm working for Mesa Police. I currently am working on cases for the Phoenix Police Department and the Department of Public Safety Special Investigations Unit. So my basic job is to just sort out the facts so that you have it to work with. I don't really take a side. I just analyze data, and we have 2 labs and we have very high-end equipment. So we're very often, if law enforcement agencies can't do it or need it done quickly, they come to us because where they're operating servers, we're operating fiber optic terra blocks. So we have quite a bit more horsepower than most forensic agencies do.
so it sounds like you work on a lot of different types of cases.
Yeah, I've worked in or for 23 different countries on different cases, and I do work a lot of homicides.
Okay, and when you're talking about work, what type of work are we talking about?
Enhancing audio, for example, 911 calls, people might want to know what's the conversation in the background of the call? What happened in the background? Can you clean up the call? Surveillance video, can you enhance what's on the surveillance video? Can you recover any video that might have been erased from a surveillance camera? That sort of thing.
And is that basically your experience that you have in working with the sound and audio, or I'm sorry, sound and video?
I have quite a few Emmy Awards from the National Associations of Television Arts and Sciences, actually quite a slew of them for technical and audio video expertise. I've also won audio awards, the gold at the Cannes Film Festival for audio, as well as the Calgary Film Festival for audio. I've worked a lot in television for, in the film industry for companies like NBC, ABC, CBS, PBS, BBC, Fox, DreamWorks, Screen Gems Films, Touchstone, LucasArts, Universal Studios, Lorimar, Trimark, Gannett, there's quite a few.
All right, and so is this what you've been doing for the past 32 years?
Yes, that, and also we do quite a bit of audio work for audio that's been damaged from television shows that needs to be fixed. But for example, most of our work is legal. We've done over 200 cases in the last 36 months, worked on evidence in over 200 cases.
And have you been certified as a forensic expert?
Yes, in
what?
federal, state, civil, and aviation, and military.
Courts?
Yes.
Okay. Were you retained on this case?
Yes.
And what were you asked to do? What did you do?
I was retained back in September, I believe September 15th of 2010, and I was asked to enhance an audio recording that was made from a telephone where the person speaking on the phone had recorded the audio and the person on the other side could not be heard very well. So I was asked to clear it up and clean it up.
Okay. Can you walk us through the process of what you do in order to
Sure.
clean up audio?
Sure. Is there a way we could activate that computer?
Judge, the computer's on. There are some sonographs and things that I think will help demonstrate what Mr. Neumeister does. May I show this?
Approach, please.
Mr. Neumeister, I'm showing you exhibit, the marker identification is exhibit number 429.
Okay.
That's a DVD. Do you know what that contains?
Yes. It contains a number of screen grabs of the protocol we use for this particular job.
Okay, and when you talk about protocols, what does that mean?
We have to follow a certain set of standards to make sure we can reproduce the work or another forensic agency can reproduce the work. So we basically catalog as we're going the steps we take.
All right, and is that what's contained on the DVD of exhibit 429?
Yes.
And did you create these?
Yes.
Judge, defense moves into evidence exhibit 429.
No objection.
429 is exhibit.
All right, and is what's in exhibit 429, is that currently on your computer?
Yes.
Okay, and so for ease of process, Judge, if I can, rather than pop the DVD and use the computer.
You may.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, the first screen I received from Mr. Nurmi's office was a recording. There were actually 7 recordings from a telephone, and I was asked to clean them up. Before we can clean them up, we have to figure out what frequencies we need to work with. So if you look at the human voice goes from about 300 hertz to about 4,000 hertz speech range, from the lows to the highs, but there are sibilants or transients like st, or those kind of words like st that can go up to 9,000 hertz. So when we're going to enhance a bit of audio, we need to first look at it physically on a graph to figure out what frequencies we have to work with. This particular audio recording was taken analog, which means out of an earphone jack into a digital recorder as an MP3 file at a bit rate of 128 kilobytes per second, which is not a particularly good quality, but it's adequate for human voice. So what we determine here, you'll see a little yellow line called the Nyquist theorem, and that means that the sample rate was fairly low. I'm going to be very generic on this. The sample rate is very low, which means the sibilance is going to be very low on this particular recording. So you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
The next, again, looks at what's called a spectrograph. And again, you can see the top audio frequencies are topping out around 4,000 hertz. It may be difficult to see, but what that means is a lot of the sibilants and transient things that make speech very understandable are missing. So we realize that we have to clean it up a bit and enhance it. And what I learned from looking at that recording is that the recording on the telephone was made at about 8 kilohertz, which was the sample rate. And again, this is just for the record. You may not understand it, or you can ask questions, and I'd be happy to answer it. But basically, in plain English, it's not a very good recording. So my job was to make it basically more intelligible. So let's go to the next slide. This real quickly, I'm just looking at how I'm going to change the audio to better work with. We changed the file from using a process called isotope. We changed it from a wave MP3 file into a 44.1 24-bit wave file, and you can see the noise kind of on the top and on the bottom. And when you go to the next slide, you can see that a lot of that noise has gone away. Can you go back to the previous slide just by hitting the opposite arrow? Look on the top above the orange, the noise that's up there. It's a little difficult to see on that graph, but then go to the next one. And what I've done is I've narrowed the voice frequency between 300 hertz and 3,400 hertz, and that's a pretty good range to work with for the human voice. Next slide. Since it was made from a cell phone, the audio was taken into a product called DC8 Live Forensics, where I eliminated some of the noises and background hum and stuff that is associated with cell phones. So, you know, some of the noise you might get behind your cell phone, some of the white noise or buzz, that was eliminated using that process. Next slide. Here, because we were limited to some of the sibilants that I talked about earlier, the S sounds and whatever, we used a little bit of what's called a vocal enhancer to bring up the kind of, I'll simply say the treble, so that it's easier to understand what people are saying. Next slide. And finally, just before we finalize it, we use a computer algorithm to remove the remaining background hiss or noise that would be on a recording. And next slide. And finally, in order to bring up Mr. Alexander's voice to that of Ms. Arias' voice, we use a program called Waves Compression, where we can bring the voices to be equal, because very often if it's a telephone recording, the person speaking is very loud and the person on the other end, it's very hard to hear. So in order to make it so that you can hear it better, we normalize it and make it so that the audio files or the voice tracks are equal decibel level. That's it.
The last slide?
That's all I needed right there.
Oh, okay. ultimately, when you finished enhancing this audio, did you put it onto a DVD?
Yes, I didn't show that because what I did is I added a time code. Now, a time code's for the jury. What it is when you're listening to audio, it's kind of boomy in here. You don't get the best acoustics. So there's a running number on the screen that you can refer to in your notes. Like you'll say, I wonder what he said there, and you write it down. And later, if you ask, I can go back and replay that piece of audio because there's a time marker that you'll be able to see playing. It's called a time code. And I don't believe that's been entered in yet, so I didn't bring a slide for that. But that was the final process, was to take the audio and put a time code on it so that the jury could, if they had questions, identify parts of the audio they had questions with.
All right, and so a time code is just something you added, just timing the call, or timing the audio.
Correct. It's just it's a running linear number, and it's basically for the jury's reference.
All right, and was there any identifying information on this audio?
Pardon?
Was there any identifying information on this audio?
Can you be a little bit more specific?
How many people are talking?
2.
And does one person ever refer to the other?
Yes, the male refers to himself as Mr.
Hearsay.
Sustained.
Judge, may we approach?
You may. Objection overruled. You may continue.
All right, and when you finished, well, let me go back to that question. Does the male ever refer to the female by name?
Yes.
What does he call her?
He refers 3 times using the name Jodi.
Okay, and does the female ever refer to the male by name?
Yes.
And what does she call him?
She refers to the name Travis twice on the tape, and he refers to himself as Mr. Alexander.
Okay. When you finished your enhancement of the audio, did you give it back to Mr. Nurmi and myself?
Yes.
How did you give it to us?
I put it on DVD with the time code.
Okay. Judge, may I approach? I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 428. Is that the DVD that you gave to us that has the audio captured on it?
There was actually, on Thursday, I just want to clarify, Thursday I did bring in a DVD that had 7 clips on it, and it was agreed by all parties to redact 2 clips. So this is the modified DVD that has 5 of the 7 original clips that I received.
Okay, and is exhibit 428 the one that has 5 clips on it?
If this is the one I brought in today, correct?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
All right. Thank you, Judge. Nothing further.
May we approach, please?
You may.
The extra 2 clips, those have nothing to do with this case, is that correct?
I believe both counsel said that it didn't have anything to do with this case and that
Right.
it should be stricken.
So there was no reason for you to do it, to have it on the DVD?
That's correct.
Okay, all
It
right.
did not
thank you.
affect, it was not part of this case.
Okay, thank you.
Cross-examination.
Sir, with regard to this particular DVD, you keep referring to counsel. It's true that the parties, including the state, agreed that the two individuals on there were Travis Alexander and Jodi Arias, correct?
Correct.
And with regard to your examination was restricted to Mr. Travis Alexander's voice, comparing that to a known sample, right? Did you compare Mr. Alexander's voice on that DVD to his known sample?
Objection relevant.
Overruled.
Early on.
Yes or no?
Yes, early on.
With regard to the defendant, you didn't make that same type of comparison, though, did you?
That's correct.
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Redirect. Any questions from the jury for this witness? I see no hands. Thank you. You may step down.
Thank you very much.
You may. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to ask that you go back to the jury room for approximately 3 minutes and then return. Please remember the admonition. Please be seated. The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Ms. Wilmot, the images on the screen.
Mr. Neumeister.
Thank you. Yes. Ms. Arias, you may come forward and take a seat, please. You can line the jury up. Line up the jury.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Nurmi,
I believe Ms. Harris needs to be sworn.
calling your client.
Yes, the defense calls Jodi Arias.
Ms. Arias, please stand to be sworn.
Raise your right hand. You can solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, I do.
Please be seated. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hi, Jodi.
Hi.
How are you feeling right now?
Nervous.
I want to ask you, well, let me ask you this. Is this a position you ever thought you would find yourself in, testifying here today?
The objection.
Relevance.
Approach, please.
Let me ask you a couple of important questions before we get back and start talking about who you are and why you're here, okay?
Okay.
Did you kill Travis Alexander on June 4th, 2008?
Yes, I did.
Why?
The simple answer is that he attacked me, and I defended myself.
Okay. It was also brought up during these proceedings that you gave an interview with Inside Edition. Do you remember seeing that tape?
Yes, I do.
And in that tape, you said that no jury would convict you, something to that effect. Do you remember seeing that? Remember saying that?
Yeah, I did say that.
Why?
I made that statement in September 2008, I believe it was. And at the time, I had plans to commit suicide. So I was extremely confident that no jury would convict me because I didn't expect any of you to be here. I didn't expect to be here, so I could have easily said no jury would acquit me either. I couldn't say that though because there was an officer sitting 5 feet behind me, and had I told them the reason no jury would convict me at that time, I would have been thrown into a padded cell and stripped down, and that would have been my life for a while until I stabilized. So I was very confident that no jury would convict me because I planned to be dead. Probably the most bitter words I'll ever eat.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I said those are probably the most bitter words I'll ever eat.
Ms. Arias, I want to clarify another thing as well when we're talking here. Your name has been pronounced, in most of this trial, Arias. Is there another way of pronouncing it? Have you always pronounced it Arias?
I've heard it pronounced about 7 different ways. I say Arias, as does the rest of my family.
Okay. Well, let's back up a little bit and then talk about your family. Who's in your immediate family?
My immediate family consists of, I'm the oldest of my parents. They also had another son about 2 years after I was born, my brother. And then I have another younger sister and another younger brother. I also have an older sister from a previous marriage of my father's.
Okay. So let me see if well, first of all, what are the names of your parents?
Bill and Sandy Arias.
Okay. And are they still married at this time?
Yes, about 33 years.
Okay. And you said you were the oldest child of Bill and Sandy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you have a half-sister that is older than you, is that right?
Yes, she's 5 years older than me.
Okay. And that is your father's daughter?
Yes, from a previous marriage.
Okay. And you have a brother that's 2 years younger than you, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what is his name?
His name is Carl.
And you mentioned I believe the next youngest would have been another sister. What was her
Yes,
name?
Angela.
Okay. And your youngest brother, who is he?
Joseph.
Okay. And just so we get a bit of separation, how much younger than you is Angela?
Angela was born when I was 11, and Joseph was born when I was 13.
And what year were you born?
1980.
Do you remember where you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in a few different cities. I was born in Salinas, California, and I lived there until I was almost 12.
Okay. And what was life like in Salinas?
For the first years of my life, it was really good.
When you say that, before you continue, let's clarify. What do you mean by first years?
I would say until about age 7, it was a fairly ideal childhood.
Okay, different people have different meanings when they say ideal, so why don't you describe for us what you mean by ideal childhood?
I have predominantly positive memories of my childhood at that time. My brother and I lived when I was about 4 years old, we moved to a house in a cul-de-sac. We had the center lot, so it was a huge backyard, and we had a lot of places to play there. There were trees to climb. There were other kids in the neighborhood and in the cul-de-sac that we played with. We were close in age, so my family traveled a lot. We went camping. We went to all the theme parks in California.
Did you go to school?
Of course, yes, I went to school.
And you went to grade school in Salinas then?
Yes, I went to a private school for about 3 years and then a public school.
Were you and Carl in school together, or did you go to different schools?
We were in school together. I was held back in kindergarten, so even though we're 2 years apart, he was only 1 grade behind me.
And tell us about your parents at that time, to your recollection. Were they both working? Was your mom at home? Tell us about that.
Yeah, when I was younger, I remember my mom used to work, I guess she was working as a server with my dad. He owned restaurants my whole life. And then when I was around 11 or 12, she became a dental assistant.
Okay. And you mentioned your life was, well, let me ask you a question. Do you remember what your interests were as a child?
Yes, I had pets, cats, dog, fish. I had a rat. I loved animals. We had a lot of pets. My brother had frogs, things like that. We played a lot of hopscotch and two square when we were younger. We went roller skating. They didn't really have rollerblades yet, or at least that we used. We rode bikes a lot. We did a lot of camping. I'm sorry, I kind of forgot the question.
All right. Well, you're speaking very quietly. Are you nervous today?
Yeah. Yes, I am.
What's that?
Yes.
Okay.
Very nervous.
Could you do me a favor and pull the mic a little closer to you? Jodi, one of the things that you said a couple questions ago when we were speaking is that your life was pretty ideal up until about age 7. Is something different after age 7, or?
It seemed like, well, my parents would just, spank us or hit us as discipline. So it seemed like at age 7, around then, it started getting a little bit more intense. That's something I remember.
Okay. You said they started spanking you.
Well, I was spanked before on occasion. Just, it seemed like the frequency and the intensity of it increased around that age.
What do you mean by that, frequency and intensity?
Well, just, there were, I think that's the first year my dad started using a belt. My mom began to carry a wooden spoon in her purse.
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
May we approach?
You may. Objection overruled.
Jodi, if you could, first of all, do us all a favor again. I know it's difficult. I know you're nervous. You've told us before. But if you could just speak up a little louder, make sure everybody can hear you, okay?
Okay.
You were just now telling us that your mother carried a spoon with her. What did she do with that spoon?
It was a wooden kitchen spoon that she would keep in her purse, and if we were misbehaving, my brother and I, this was before Angela and Joseph were born, although it continued through that point. If we were misbehaving, she would use it on us. Sometimes she would pull the car over, and, you know, if we were just being brats or something.
What do you mean by use it on you?
She would hit us with it.
She hit you hard?
It felt pretty hard, yes. It left welts.
It left welts on your body?
Yes.
When your dad hit you with the belt, did that leave welts on your body?
Objection, lack of foundation. Correct. A.
Rephrase.
You told us that your dad hit you with the belt
Yes.
after age 7.
Yes.
Did he leave welts?
He didn't leave welts as often as my mom. She also used to belt. My dad was very intimidating, so I don't think he needed to hit us quite as hard to get the point across. My mom didn't carry that fear factor with her, so I think she used more force. So her blows felt a lot worse, actually.
Physically or emotionally?
Both.
You loved your mother?
Yes.
And
I
she
did.
hit you?
Yes.
You said that these were frequent, these incidents where your mother would hit you, they were frequent and intense. I think those are your words, right?
They were definitely intense, but they increased in frequency
Okay.
as I got a little older.
Can you discern for us how many times a week your mother would beat you with this spoon?
I don't recall how many times particularly, but it seemed like it could go anywhere from 4 times a week to once every 2 weeks. It just depended.
Okay. Now, how long did you live in Salinas? How old were you?
I was born there and I lived there until age 11.
Okay. So let me ask you this, that you talked about these beatings that began at age 7 when you lived in Salinas. Tell us about the next few years before you left Salinas. Did you continue going to school, that sort of thing? Tell us about that.
Yes, I went to a public school, had a lot of friends. My brother was at that school too, and he had his own circle of friends. And we would just do things together, school activities, after school activities. And
Activities, what were your interests at this point in time in your life?
I began to get into art. Again, my pets were very central in my life at that time. I began to read a lot of books. I took piano lessons. My brother and I took karate lessons. He learned the clarinet. I learned the flute, things like that, just general.
Okay. Do me a favor, because when you say the word art, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people in terms of, it's a pretty broad area. So were there certain areas of the art world that you were interested in, or can you describe that for us?
Yeah, when I was younger, I liked to color with Crayolas. And my older sister and I would color, and there were a lot of colors. She had the big box with all of the Crayolas, and so we would draw pictures and just watch cartoons and that kind of thing. So I would have coloring books, and I just began to take an interest in that because I wasn't able to draw what I saw, but I would see art, and it would fascinate me. So I slowly began to practice doing that.
Okay. Now, at this point in time, did The beatings from your mother and father, did they continue?
Yes.
Did they increase in nature?
They began to increase, I'd say, all the way through my teenage years.
Did they increase, you've talked about frequency and severity. Did the level of the brutality increase?
Yes. My brother and I we didn't like being hit. I know I didn't. So we would squirm around a little, and so the more we squirmed, the harder they would try to whack us. So just as that progressed, things would increase, At one point, I don't think she meant to, but my mom broke my brother's vein in his wrist because he was putting his hand behind his back to block one of her blows. And, as I became a teenager, my dad would get rougher and rougher.
Okay. Before we go on to rougher and rougher, let me ask you this, and I'm not simply talking physically. How did they feel? How did you feel when your own mother was beating you?
When I was younger, I remember feeling, I didn't have a word for it then, but I can describe it as betrayed and confused. And as I got a little bit older, it would just really make me mad because I didn't get why, I don't know, I understood that I was being punished, but I would just be mad at her a lot over that because it hurt.
Because you still loved her?
Yeah, I loved my mom.
Even though she was still beating you, you still loved her?
Yes, it put a strain on our relationship, but I still loved her, of course.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
I still loved her.
Going back to what you said a few minutes ago about your dad and the beatings getting rougher and rougher, could you describe for us what you mean by that?
Yeah, he never beat me with his fists or anything, but he would just shove me into furniture, sometimes into the piano or things like that, into tables, chairs, desks, whatever was around. He would just push me really hard and I would go flying into that. One time I hit a doorpost, the side of my head hit the doorpost and it knocked me out momentarily. I just remember waking up on the ground with, my mom was there, we were all arguing. I was arguing with my mom and he got involved. And so I remember waking up and she was telling him to be careful.
And this incident you just described about you passing out or knocking into a door frame or doorpost as you described it, do you remember how old you were when this happened?
By then I was age 17, maybe 16, but I think I was 17.
Okay. Let's back up a little bit because you talked about instances of you being pushed into furniture and a piano, like it was just like nothing to it. Did this happen a lot?
Not as often with my dad as with my mom, but it just, I don't know, if I did something to upset them, it would happen.
Okay.
Sometimes I got grounded. That became more the norm in high school, so the physical punishment was a little bit more farther apart, but more intense than it was prior.
At this time that you were getting these beatings from your dad, did you love him as well?
Yes, of course.
In this time period now, you said you moved from Salinas about age 11?
Yes.
Okay. And where did you move to?
We moved to Santa Maria, California.
And I know we talked about this is where in Santa Maria, your dad was pushing you into furniture, right? Is this where these things were
Yeah,
taking
these
place?
things really started in Santa Maria.
Okay. And was that where you went to, would that have been your junior high years, if I follow that correctly?
Yeah, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Okay. And did you go to school with Carl then?
I did.
Okay. And what were your interests at that point in time?
At that point, I was really focused on trying to make new friends. That was kind of difficult. In 6th grade, I went to an elementary school, and then in 7th grade, I went to another new school it was called it was junior high school, then it's now middle school, I guess. But, so it seemed like I was constantly going to new schools. There was this new school, then another new school, and then, then we moved again. And so it was just hard to make friendships. I did make a few close friends, though.
Okay. Well, you mentioned earlier that in your grade school years, you had an interest in art.
Yes,
Okay. Did that continue through junior high?
definitely. I don't remember so much in 6th grade focusing on my art, but in junior high, I took an art class, maybe 2 art classes, both years. And I had a really cool art teacher, and he mentored me.
Okay. Let me ask you, as it relates to your parents, how was your interest in art received? Did they encourage that? How was it received by your parents?
They didn't discourage me by any means, but they were lukewarm, I'd say. It was like, oh, that's nice. They weren't really moved by it, I don't think. I was getting a lot of praise from my classmates and my art teacher and other people, but I didn't really get that from them. They were just a little bit indifferent, but not disappointed.
Was that hard for you not to get encouragement from your parents?
It didn't really bother me at that time. I would think it was kind of the norm, so I was accustomed to it.
Okay. By that time in your life, you were used to them not fostering your interests, right?
That's me.
Let me ask you this. Did your parents ever show any interest as you were growing up in your artwork? Did they ever foster your interest in art?
They did minimally at one point. I think this was after I moved to Santa Maria. I was enrolled in one art class, which was after school, and it lasted a few weeks. I created a few pieces, a few projects, and I remember other family members being more encouraging. I have a cousin who's a very accomplished artist, and he complimented my work, and that was in the presence of my parents, so
Okay.
they never really went out of their way to, display it or anything like that, but I don't know.
All right. And where did you go to high school?
I went to high school, after 8th grade, we moved to Northern California, to Yreka, and I went to Yreka Union High School.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. You said
It's
Yreka
called,
something.
at least when I was there, it's called Yreka Union High School.
Okay. And I'll ask this because it's different in different places. What grades were you in when you entered Yreka High School?
That school is grades 9 through 10. I'm sorry, 9 through 12.
Okay. So what years then did you enter? Did you enter in your freshman year or later?
Freshman year.
Okay. And so you were starting off at a new school again in high school, right?
Yes.
Okay. And just to give us a sense of things, how far was Yreka from Santa Maria where you moved from?
I don't know the mileage, but let's see, from Salinas to Santa Maria, it's 8 hours, and then, Salinas to Yreka is 8 hours, and then Santa Maria is another 3 hours south, so.
Okay. So you were several hours.
Over 10
away from
hours,
your
yeah,
friends,
over 10, yeah.
Did you know anybody at Yreka High School when you were going?
I didn't know anybody when I moved there, but my mother went to, I don't know if she went to school with or knew another woman about her age who had a daughter my age that was going into high school as well. So we hung out a little bit during the summer, so I knew her and her sister. That was it.
Just a couple people.
Yes.
Now you mentioned when you moved to, based on what you told us before, we correct in understanding that the beatings, the pushing of the furniture, that sort of thing with your dad continued throughout your high school years?
Yes.
Were those the incidents you were talking about before, about being pushed into the post and the furniture, or were there other incidents?
That happened when I was in high school. There were a few things that happened right before we moved. A bunch of friends and I one night decided, like the last night I was there, we decided to sneak out of the house and hang out. And my parents woke up and found out. So when I came back, my dad asked where I had been, and I had fallen asleep. He woke me up around 6. And so when I sat up and I was disoriented because I had been sleeping. So I didn't give him a satisfactory answer. So he hit me across the face and I fell back down, and then he sat me back up and asked me again, and I didn't give him a satisfactory answer. So he hit me across the face again, and I fell down again.
When you say he hit you across the face, did he punch you?
No, it was an open-handed, hard slap.
Do you recall, did you bleed?
No, I didn't. Not that I recall.
Did you bruise?
Not that I recall.
Did it hurt?
Yes.
Just so we can clarify as well, your dad's a pretty big guy, right?
He was very big at that time. His health he's frail now, but he was very big at the time.
Can you give us an idea of how tall and how much he weighed at that time?
I don't know his weight, but he's about 5'11". He used to bench press 520 pounds. He was a really big guy for a while.
You said he used to bench press 500 something pounds.
520, yes.
Was that a hobby of his, weightlifting, or can you describe that for us?
Yes, he was very much into weightlifting. He had, I guess it was like a Bowflex machine at home. I think it was called Soloflex. It was one from like the 80s, but he would use that a lot to work out. He was into martial arts. We watched a lot of movies like that. Things like that. He went to the gym frequently.
To your knowledge, was your mom aware, I know you mentioned the one incident where your mom was present, was your mom aware of your dad beating you?
Well, when she was present, yes, of course. Sometimes we were on road trips together, and they would take turns if they, had to pull the car over or something. Not that it happened several times in one trip, but I remember it being both my mom and my dad punishing me in the presence of each other. And I don't know, when she was gone, I assumed they would talk about it.
Okay. We talked a little bit about your dad during high school and your mom with the wooden spoon. In your younger years, did your mom's beatings with the wooden spoon, did they continue in high school as well?
They continued for a short time, but I think as I turned 16, 17, I don't recall her carrying the wooden spoon around. She would just start grabbing whatever was available, like a hairbrush, or she had acrylic nails, so sometimes she would grab me and dig her nails into my skin, things like that.
Okay. In high school, what were some of your interests?
In high school, I was very interested in learning Spanish, so I took that all throughout high school and middle school. I was getting into art. I was excited to get my driver's license. I traveled abroad to Costa Rica to learn Spanish better. I had a few friends. I didn't really make a lot of close friends like I had before. It just seemed like I was constantly making friends and then we were moving away. So,
Check in on the scope she was at her interests.
Sustained.
Do you have a lot of friends in high school?
I had a large circle of friends, but nobody I was very close with.
Would I be correct in assuming that your interest in art by the time you're in high school moved beyond the Crayola crayon phase?
Yeah, very much so.
Tell us about that.
I was at my grandmother's house one day and she had an old set of oil paint, and I knew what oil paint was. I'd never worked in that medium before, so I didn't know what I was doing. I just took a piece of printer paper and started painting oil paint on his paper, and oil began to spread around the paint. So I figured, okay, that's not going to work. So I went to Michael's, the arts and crafts store, and bought some supplies and began to experiment with that and started painting.
And did you work during high school?
I did. My dad owned a restaurant at the north end of town. It's now a Mexican restaurant, but he owned it then, and I would work as a server there from the time I was a freshman on through, I think, 96 or 7 when he closed it.
So you started working in 9th grade. How old were you in 9th grade?
In 9th grade, I was 15.
And was there a certain amount of days you worked while you were in high school?
He put me on a few afternoons and the weekends.
Okay. Did you graduate high school?
No, I didn't.
Why didn't you graduate high school?
At the time, about 3 months, well, it's kind of complicated. Should
Okay. Well, let's talk about it. Did you drop out of high school?
Yes, I did.
Where were you living at the time that you dropped out of high school?
I was living with my boyfriend at the time, about a little town 6 miles outside of Wairika.
Let's break that. Why did you leave? Prior to that, were you living with your parents?
Yes.
Why did you leave your parents' home to go live with your boyfriend?
I was kind of becoming tired of the discipline, and I was 3 months until I was 18. And one day they decided to ground me until I was 18 because I skipped one period in high school because there was a final for I was taking a college history class, U.S. history, and I didn't feel like I'd adequately studied for the exam, so I skipped that period to study for the exam and decided I would make it up the next day. So I parked my car in the parking lot of Rite Aid and just cracked open the book, and I was studying it for that hour. And my dad, somehow he found me. It's a small town, so I guess the school notified him that I wasn't present for that class, so he found me, and at that point, they didn't use physical discipline that day, but I was grounded till I was 18, so I couldn't fathom being grounded for 3 months. When you were grounded in my house, it meant no phone, no TV, no friends, no social functions of any kind. You're in your room, period. So
let me ask you this. This would have been towards the end of your senior year in high school, or was this at the end of your
yeah, it was in May, I think,
Okay, so of your senior year or of your junior
maybe
year?
April. My junior year,
Okay.
yes.
So you dropped out of high school before you finished your junior year? Is that right?
No, I did finish the junior year, mostly with D's and F's, because toward the end of the year, I just let it all fall apart.
You mentioned discipline, you talked about grounding. Was there any particular physical incident or an incident of abuse that motivated you to leave your parents' home?
One of the incident I described where I was knocked against, I called it a doorpost, I guess it's a door frame. Then at that point the guy I was dating, we started talking about me possibly moving in with him. So after that incident, I began to surreptitiously pack boxes of my things and start moving them out to his house. And then when they grounded me until I was 18, all of my stuff mostly was there. And I thought, I'm just going to go ahead. I was going to wait until I was 18 to move in with him, but it was 3 months away, and it just made sense to me at the time as a 17-year-old. So I just moved out.
Okay. After your junior year then, did you just not go back to school? Is that?
Yeah, I turned 18 that summer. I got a job at another restaurant and began working there full time. I had bills to pay now, car insurance and credit cards and that kind of thing. So it just, to me, it made more sense to work so I could support myself and my boyfriend. He didn't have a job.
And what was your boyfriend's name?
His name was Bobby
What was his last name?
Juarez.
And Mr. Juarez, how old was he in relation to you?
He was 3 years older than me.
So he would have been out of school, I would assume?
Yes, he was out of high school.
And what did he do for a living?
He had never been employed at that point, so, you know, it was an isolated town we lived in, and it was difficult to obtain employment.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this, as it relates to Mr. Juarez, when did you meet him?
I first met him the first summer that I moved to Wairika when I was 15. The carnival comes to town, and so I was there with the girl I had mentioned that my mom introduced me to. Her and her sister, we were there. And I saw him walking in a crowd with a few other friends, and he caught my eye. It was very intriguing looking. He was kind of dressed like 18th century goth, kind of. He was.
Well, can you describe for some of us who may not follow that reference, just kind of describe what he was wearing? Maybe?
Yeah, it was like July or August when I met him, and it's in the maybe triple digits in the temperature. It's very hot. Wairika gets really hot, not quite like the desert, but in the triple digits in the summer. But this guy was dressed in a black suit and a high collar white shirt, and he was on crutches. He had long, dark, curly hair, and he just seemed intriguing to me. So I remember seeing him walk by, and I didn't approach him or anything, but I noticed him. So we spent the day there, my friends and I, walking around, and at one point they were getting in line for the zipper. I didn't want to get on the zipper. There was only 2 per cage anyway, so I was kind of the third odd one out. So I just stood next to the line waiting for them to go on the zipper and come back. But I was just looking around, and I caught his eye again, and he was looking right at me. And he motioned for me to come over. He went like that. And I didn't know if he was talking to me, so I kind of looked around and looked at him again, and he did it again. So I walked up to him, and he said, in a very kind way, he said, "Do you want to go?" Oh, sorry.
Sustained.
Let me ask you this without telling you what he said, and just to clarify a bit based on what you told us, he would have been around the age of 18 at this time, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you were 15. You meet him at a state fair.
Yes.
Thing. Okay. Tell us then, do you begin a relationship at that point in time, or just kind of describe for us how that relationship was at that time?
No, he invited me to go on the zipper with him, so we went on one ride with that and talked a little bit as we were flipping around, and after that we parted, and I didn't see him again for a while.
Okay. When did you see him again?
I think it was October, maybe November of that same year. I was at a homecoming football game for my high school, and I saw him again, and he was with some friends. And I was really shy, but I wanted to say hi to him, so I walked up to him and said, "Do you remember me?" And he said he remembered me, but he couldn't remember my name, so I told him I didn't remember his name either. So we kind of reintroduced ourselves, and he said, "Tell me your phone number, and I promise I'll remember it." So I gave him the house phone, which was my parents' phone. We didn't have cell phones. And he remembered it and called me.
Did you begin dating at that time?
No, we were just friends. We talked for a while. We weren't dating.
Okay.
He was actually seeing a girl, I think. I don't remember.
Okay. So you were just friends for a period of time?
Yeah, several months. We were just friends.
But you were telling us he became your boyfriend at that point, so I'm assuming at some point in time that you two began dating.
Yeah, the girl broke up with him, and there was a period of time where he was single and I was single, and we started just talking more and more. And then I think it was on New Year's that year when I was a freshman, we decided to become boyfriend-girlfriend.
Okay. And then you said that was your the beginning of your sophomore year? Or?
I would have still been a freshman then.
Okay. And you said you were going to become boyfriend and girlfriend?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, you guys decided that. Was he still in high school at that point in time?
No, he was out of high school.
And to your recollection, was he working at that point in time?
No, he wasn't working.
Okay. Describe for us then what being boyfriend and girlfriend at that stage in your life meant for you and Mr. Juarez.
For us, I didn't have a car. I didn't have a driver's license yet. I think I was getting my permit that year. So he would come to town, and so during lunch, a lot of kids would leave campus, and there's a small gas station, USA gas station near the high school. So I would walk down there and he would be there. There was an arcade there, and he really liked video games, so we would meet there and just hang out, hold hands, that kind of thing.
Okay. How long at this point in time, how long did you date Bobby continuously from the time that you were 15 till you moved out of the home?
No, we stayed together for a while, and I think at age 15 I felt like the relationship was getting very intense. He was talking about being together forever, and I loved him, but I didn't feel like I was in love with him, and I knew at age 15 there's no way I could decide who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with at that point. So he wanted to move to San Francisco, and he had all kinds of wild ideas, they seemed fun, but they were just not where I was. So at that point, I broke up with him.
What do you mean wild ideas?
Well, he entertained the belief in vampires, and he thought, well, let's go to San Francisco and see if we can find some real vampires. And, I used to read Anne Rice novels at the time. It didn't seem realistic to me, but it seemed like it was just an idea that I would go along with, with him.
And this was at a time when you were about 15 years of age. He wanted to move to San Francisco and hunt vampires,
Yeah.
right?
So we could live together forever and be together forever.
Was there a certain point in time then when this was going on and you said it was getting too intense for you? Did you and Mr. Juarez break up?
Yes. It was one afternoon. I broke up with him on the phone. I don't know where my parents were, but my Aunt Lisa was at the house. She was picking my brother and I up. I was having this conversation with him. He was very upset. And Lisa wanted us to leave. She wanted to take us. We had to go somewhere with her. So I didn't have time to stay on the phone with him for a long time and talk through it with him. So I had to sort of abruptly end the phone call shortly thereafter, and it was, I don't know, I guess he didn't take that well.
Okay. What do you mean by you guess he didn't take it that well?
I found out a few years later that he...
Objection, Pearson.
Approach. Overruled. You may continue.
Sorry, Mr. We were asking You said you understood that Mr. Juarez didn't take the breakup you had when you were about 15 so well. Describe for us what you mean by that.
I learned a few years later that he slit both of his wrists and tried to kill himself. And he was committed to some kind of psychiatric ward in Citrus Heights, just north of Sacramento.
Okay. Did you have, after this phone call where you broke up and you left the home, did you have any sort of relationship with him in between that and the well, let me ask you this way. It sounds like he was your boyfriend again about the time when you turned 18, right? A few months
Yes.
beforehand? Okay. How did that come about?
We didn't talk at that point for a few years. It's kind of silly. There was this older man that used to come into my parents' restaurant. I'd say he was in his 60s, maybe 70s, and he always had his Bible. And it was a small pocket version of the New Testament, and he had it all marked up, and he was always, quoting Bible scripture and things. And he had done the math in the Bible and determined that he knew when the second coming was going to occur. And he said it was going to occur September 23rd, 1997. So I was really naive, and I kind of believed him. So he would come in weekly or several times a week on my shift and continue to reiterate that. So, at the time I was non-denominational Christian and this seemed important. So I thought that Bobby should know about it because at the time he wasn't religious and he was uncertain about his spirituality, at least when I last had known him. So to me it was important that he at least hear that information. So he could make a decision for himself. So I made contact with him again and called him in, I think, mid-September 2007.
Okay,
I'm sorry, 1997.
Just so we're clear, in terms of your high school years, how long of a break, I guess, was there between this phone call that you made to break up with Mr. Juarez and the phone call you made to recontact him? How long of a break was there in between those two?
I'd say, let's see, maybe 19 months.
Okay. So you make this phone call to Mr. Juarez, and you said this was in 1997?
Yes.
Okay. And where would you have been in school then? Would you be in junior year or?
I was just starting my junior year.
Okay. And subsequent to this phone call, did you begin to remain in friendship with Mr. Juarez? Tell us about how that evolved.
Well, when I first called, he answered the phone. I could recognize his voice. And I said, "Is Bobby there?" And he said, "Yeah, who's this?" And I said, "Jodi." And I immediately heard a click. So I left it alone and I thought, okay, because our last phone call some years back didn't end well. And so the next night I tried one more time and the same thing happened. So I left it alone. And about...
Well, let me ask you this before we continue. You mentioned that Wairika was a pretty small town, right?
Yes.
Yeah. You never ran into Mr. Juarez in between these two phone calls?
No, he didn't live in Wairika. He lived in Montague, which is 6 miles from Wairika. It's even smaller. I think there's about 1,000 people in that town.
Okay. But never during this time did you run into him at all?
No.
Okay. And I'm sorry, you had talked about, you had called him a couple times, you hear the click on the other end of the phone. How does the relationship progress from that point?
I don't know how many days later. It was under a week, maybe 4 days, maybe 5 days. I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and we were talking, and I heard the call waiting beep, so I clicked over, and I heard someone say, "Is Jodi there?" And I recognized his voice, so I clicked back over and said, "I have to call you back." So I clicked back over, and we started talking again.
Okay. Did you after that conversation, did you become friends again? Did you start dating again? Just describe that for us.
Yeah, I felt kind of silly explaining to him why I was calling him, especially knowing that his religious beliefs at that time were not really defined. And I kind of expected him to laugh at me, but it was important to me. So I told him the reason I was calling, and
Overruled, you may continue.
he expressed appreciation for that, which surprised me. We just sort of picked up from there and began talking again.
Does talking mean dating?
No, not yet.
Mr. Nervy, we're going to take the afternoon recess. Ladies and gentlemen, please be back in the designated area at 3:20. Please remember the admonition. You are excused.
All rise for the jury.
The presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. There was a computer issue, and it resulted in us needing to substitute court reporters. You may continue, Mr. Nerby.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Arias, before we took a break, I believe we were talking about the point in time in your life when you got back together with Jodi Arias.
Yes.
And from what I understood earlier, you were about 17 years of age when that took place. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you were talking about how he had called you, responded to your initial phone contact. Tell us how the relationship progressed from him making telephone contact with you.
Well, at the time I had a boyfriend. He lived in another country. So we corresponded. So it wasn't a romantic reason. Like I had said, I reached out to him for a spiritual reason. I don't know if he was seeing anybody at that time. I don't think he was. He used to call a party line a lot and meet people on that. I guess this was before the internet was really, in every single home.
Let me interrupt you a little bit there on a couple of different things. You said he made contact on a party line. What is that? Can you describe that for us?
From my understanding, I didn't talk on it, but from my understanding, it was a 900 number that you could call, and it's like a chat room, but it's on the telephone instead of on the computer.
And you chatted to Bobby that way, or he?
I didn't. He chatted with other people that way.
Okay. And you also mentioned, I don't want to be too far from it, you mentioned that when he made this contact with you, after the contact he made for what you described as spiritual reasons, you said that you had a boyfriend in another country, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what was that boyfriend's name?
Victor.
Did Victor have a last name?
Arias, ironically.
I'm sorry, what?
His last name was also Arias.
Okay. And where did you meet Victor Arias?
The summer that I turned 17, right before I turned 17 in July, I flew to Costa Rica on an exchange program, and I spent 3 weeks there with a family. Their name was also Arias, and they had 2 sons and 2 daughters in that family, and the oldest son was just a little older than me, and so we kind of clicked and got to know each other and sort of had a little romance kind of blossom thing. I don't know, it was
Okay.
like my first experience of like the warm fuzzy, somebody that I really felt that I cared for.
Okay, and that relationship lasted a few weeks, or tell me how it lasted beyond your being there?
It sort of began to develop while I was in Costa Rica. And I flew back toward the end of, I had my 17th birthday there in that country, and then I flew back at near the end of July. And we corresponded and talked occasionally on the phone through August, and then he flew to the United States that September and stayed in Redding, which is a city about 100 miles south of Wairika. He had some people that he knew there. He stayed there about a week, I think, and then stayed at my house for 2 weeks before flying back.
And when did he come stay for you for 2 weeks? When was that?
That was early September 1997.
So this is about the time then that you were, close to the time that you were in contact with Mr. Juarez as well, right?
Yes, it was just right before that.
Okay. And you considered Mr. Arias to be a boyfriend?
Yeah, actually, he had given me a ring, and it was kind of a promise ring, like we were going to get married, but we weren't officially engaged. So we would talk about children and marriage, and he wanted me to come live down there and start a family.
Okay. You said it's your first experience of, I guess, what we call young love, right?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I wouldn't say totally in love, but it was my first taste of being like, just feeling like warm about somebody, if that makes sense.
As it relates to your situation then, Mr. Arias, Victor, he goes back to Costa Rica, I assume, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the relationship becomes one probably, is it primarily of letters, phone calls? Describe that for us.
Yeah, we wrote a lot. The postman actually got to know my name and face, and he would tease me every time I went to the post office to get it stamped to send to Costa Rica. And I would receive letters from him that were really romantic, and the Spanish language is very romantic, so he would write things like that, very romantic.
Okay, and relative to your age, how old was Victor?
I don't remember his exact age. I want to say he was about a year older than me. I think we were just, we were very close in age, but he was older than me.
Okay. Now, when you started interacting with Mr. Juarez again, we've heard from your earlier testimony that he became your boyfriend at a certain point in time when you were around 17 years old, right?
Yes.
Okay. Could you just kind of describe for us what happened in that time period when Victor was your boyfriend and then Bobby became your boyfriend?
Yes. Bobby and I would talk a few times a week, and then it became a little more frequent. Victor and I would, I couldn't see myself like moving to Costa Rica and having that kind of life and having children with him. We argued like over little silly things. Victor was very jealous, and so we would I couldn't talk to any of my high school friends that were guys. I went through the drive-through, and there was a classmate that I had gone to school with 2 years, over the years, and he had a job there, and I was driving, of course, because Victor was from out of the country, and we just were there to get ice cream. It was hot, and he gave us the ice cream, and we hadn't seen each other all summer, this person that served us, and the interaction I had with him, Victor didn't like it, so we argued over things like that, When we were in Costa Rica, he wanted me always to walk on the inside of on the sidewalk away from the street. And we were at a huge soccer game there. It's a very big deal there. They call it football, but it's soccer. And there was actually someone that walked by that looked a lot like Bobby, and it kind of reminded me of him at the time. He had long, dark, curly hair, and I glanced at him, and Victor got upset. So things like that, I just didn't see myself being in a marriage with him. So I broke up with him around October, maybe November, 1997, on the phone.
On the phone?
Yes.
Okay. After you broke up with Victor, did you continue seeing Mr. Juarez?
We weren't really seeing each other. We were just friends at that time, but we continued to talk.
Okay. When did the friendship move into something more, to be your boyfriend?
It was again around New Year's. I think we spent New Year's Eve. I had a car then, so we drove out to this little white chapel it's called Little Shasta. It's even smaller town. I don't even know if it's considered a town. And it's this small white chapel with a tall steeple, and there was snow everywhere. And we just kind of hung out there and rung in the New Year. Didn't really do it. I had began to develop feelings for him right before Christmas, and so I expressed that, and he said he had feelings for me too, and so we decided to give things another try at that point.
Okay. And this would have been a few months prior to you moving in with him. Is that right?
I believe I moved in with him in late April, and so we're around the New Year. So 4 months, 4.5, maybe 5.
Did your parents, were they aware of your relationship with, and I'm speaking as it relates to the occasion we're talking about now, when you're 17, excuse me. Did they know about your relationship with Mr. Juarez?
They knew about it. I don't know how they knew. I wasn't very open with them about my relationships because of prior negative experiences with regard to that. So somehow, I mean, it's a small town. I'm sure people told them they saw us running around or hanging out in the park or just walking around, and we hung out. So people would tell my mom and things like that.
Did you ever get any indication that your parents approved or disapproved of this relationship?
I didn't talk extensively with my dad about it, but my mom didn't like the fact that I was with him because she was basing her opinion on him off of rumors she had heard about him.
Okay. When you described it in high school how you were working for your father at your father's restaurant, right?
Yes.
And you were in high school your junior year. All this was going on at the point in time when you began dating Mr. Juarez, right?
I think my dad's restaurant closed the year prior when I was still a sophomore. I can't quite remember. No, I think he closed that spring. I think he closed that spring in 90, that would have been 98. Okay. I can't remember. It was sometime in high school he closed his restaurant.
Okay. Did you work elsewhere after that?
Yes.
Before you moved out?
Did I? Yes. I worked briefly as a hostess at a little restaurant called Grandma's House.
And during this point in time when you're a 17-year-old high school student, Mr. Juarez is out of school, are you supplying him with money at this point in time before you've left school?
Yes. Well, he lived with 2 people he called mom and dad. I think they were his grandparents. Bobby said he was adopted, so his real parents, it was kind of, I never really met them. But he lived with them. They would be his mom and dad, by definition. So I think they were just supplying, clothing and shelter and food and that kind of thing at that point.
Okay. So going back to my question, were you supplying Mr. Juarez with money at this point in time?
At this point, no.
Okay. Then you leave high school and you move in with Mr. Juarez, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. In the spring.
And you mentioned that he was living with persons you believe to be his grandparents, his
Yes.
adopted grandparents?
I don't know if they were like really related or if he just called them his parents. But if anything, they were more like his grandparents, but he called them mom and dad.
You say that because of their age, as opposed
Yeah, they were
to-
very much older. I actually saw who everyone around town kind of knew was his mother, but he didn't want anything to do with her, and she was more appropriate age to be his mother. And these people were more like in their 70s, late 70s maybe.
Okay. When you spoke about your first relationship with Mr. Juarez, you spoke about his desire to move to San Francisco and chase vampires and be with you forever, and how he dressed in a goth style. Was that 15-year-old Bobby the same way he was when you got back together with him?
No, he was 20 now. He was a little more mature, but he still had that eccentricity about him. He had a flair. For Halloween, he would dress up as the character played by Brandon Lee from The Crow, with the white face and all black leather and all that. So it was a Halloween thing, but he really got into that, and he did it pretty well, actually. So he was still drawn to that, and part of that was fascinating to me. I thought he was beautiful on the inside and out, and I was attracted to him in that regard. But he was a little more down to earth at this point.
Earlier, you were describing for us a situation where you were taking some of your possessions and moving it into Mr. Juarez's home, and now eventually you moved out.
Yes.
Okay. What was the last straw for you to move out of your house?
I think the last straw was actually when they said you're grounded until you're 18. And a lot of my things were already at Bobby's house or his parents' house. They were putting it in a storage shed right behind the house. Just boxes of things that I had been saving because I knew I was going to be on my own soon. My dad had recently closed his restaurant. He let me have a lot of the plates, the dishes, the silverware. So that would just get me started. So things like that, old books I'd already read but didn't want to part with, things like that went to the storage shed. And then when I was grounded, I thought I only have a few more things to throw in the car plus my cat. So I stayed up all night packing while my parents slept. And my dad, when he would ground me, he used to unhook my car. I don't know what that means, but I would go out and try to turn the engine and it wouldn't turn. He unhooked something under the hood, and I think I figured out how to rehook it, so then he started taking the entire piece so that I couldn't rehook it. So the first thing I did was I went out after they went to sleep to check if my car would start, and it did, so I was relieved. So I began to load up the car. I was almost completely packed, and then I think around 4:30 or 5, I heard one of my parents awake. So I was in the living room, still packing up a few things, and I jumped on the couch real quick to pretend like I was sleeping so they wouldn't wonder why I was awake. And I was very tired, so I ended up falling asleep. And the next thing I knew, it was 7:30 or 7 o'clock, and my mom was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. And I thought, oh shoot, I missed my opportunity. But I just went into my bedroom, found my cat, picked her up, and I just started walking out the door. My mom said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing." And I just shut the door and put my cat in my car and drove out to Bobby's house, unloaded it, and then went to school that day.
And you say Bobby's house. These people you described as his grandparents, did they live in this home as well?
Yes.
Okay. And was there anyone else besides them and Bobby in this home?
No.
Okay. Describe for us the environment you were leaving your home with your parents in order to live with Bobby. What were you moving to?
It was, structurally, the house was very good, but it was in very bad shape. His parents were very heavy smokers, so there was always a haze hanging out in the living room, and there was a lot of, I don't know what it's called, I guess tar or something running down the walls, kind of in a deep brown. The living room was almost not quite to the ceiling, but it was packed with a bunch of things. I don't know what it was, just various odds and ends. I guess they were hoarders. Bobby did the best to make his bedroom his own little space. But he wasn't allowed to touch any of those things while they were there. And so, I mean, the kitchen was very, very dirty. The bathroom was very dirty. The linoleum was coming off the floor and the shower was kind of falling apart. And it was just a mess. All of the yard all around the house was overgrown. I went back to my parents' house a few days later to borrow their cleaning supplies for it.
Doesn't sound like Bobby's house was a great place to live.
No, he hated it. Like I said, his own room, he did his best to make that his space and make it habitable. And then his parents would kind of sit in the living room all day and watch TV and smoke till they went to bed.
You mentioned he kept his room in a different way. Was that a room you shared with him?
Yes.
Were you having a sexual relationship with him at that point in time?
I'm trying to remember if we were at that point. We did eventually. I don't remember if it was right before I moved in with him. I think it was right after I moved in with him. I can't remember. We waited several months.
Okay. So from what you're telling us then is that you moved into this home, this filthy home with one clean room in it. You dropped out of high school and you were working, right?
Sorry, will you repeat that?
At this point in time when you moved in with Bobby, you were at the end of your junior year and that was your last school,
Yes, I was
right?
coming up on the end of my junior year.
And you were working as well, I believe you said, at Grandma's? if I heard
Yes,
you
my
correctly.
dad had recently closed his restaurant, and I think I got a part-time position there at Grandma's house.
Okay. And was this how you were supporting yourself?
Yes, it was.
And were you supporting Mr. Juarez as well?
Not quite yet. Occasionally we'd go on a date, and I, of course, would pay for it, which wasn't a big deal to me at the time. He had a problem getting identification to prove that he was legally able to work in the United States. So he didn't have a photo ID. He couldn't find a copy of his birth certificate. He didn't have a social security card, but he did have a social security number. But every time we went to the DMV or the social security office or the courthouse, they wanted one form of identification that we were trying to get. So of those three, it was hard to get all of them. So he couldn't, that was the reason he couldn't work, or so. That was what I understood.
Okay. So, based on what you told us earlier then, at the end of your junior year, you drop out of high school and you begin working full-time to support yourself, right?
Yes, Bobby and I went to Chico, California briefly, which is near Sacramento. It's a little bit south, I think. I was going to work there. I was going to live there. It didn't work out. We were there for about a week, and we went back. And so then I applied at a restaurant where I applied at Denny's, actually. And the woman there that gave me a good reference had worked for my dad the previous year, her and her husband. So I was hired there around, I think, August 2000. Wait, I'm sorry. That would be 1998.
And are you working full-time?
Yes, I am. Was.
Okay. And is that the only job you had, or did you have another?
I didn't, I'm sorry, I forgot, because in between that, I did have a brief job at this restaurant called the Purple Plum. I was a busser. I worked there briefly before thinking I was going to move to Chico, and then I came back and began to work at Denny's.
So working at Denny's, was this how you were supporting yourself and Mr. Juarez?
Yes, that became our income.
Were you making a lot of money?
Well, the cost of living wasn't very high. I would say no, but we were making ends meet because I didn't have rent or mortgage. At that point, his parents had moved out and into a rest home. So we had the kind of run of the house and cleaned it up a little and, discovered just things about the house that we didn't know about before because it was so cluttered.
Well, who was paying for the phone? Who was paying for the power?
Not me. I don't know. I guess I really don't know. The phone was there, the power was there. I think his parents were still paying for it.
Okay.
I don't know.
Were you giving Bobby money to buy food, or how was that?
Yes, I went grocery shopping. I started buying him a few clothes. At one point, the power did shut off in the winter.
The power was shut off.
Yeah, it was shut off briefly.
So how did you get by? Were you able to get it turned back on? How did that work?
We had a furnace and we used candles for a while. It was very cold. I don't remember how they got the power on, but Bobby had a friend or knew somebody that he had come over to the house and he tinkered with a meter on the side of the house and then we had power again. So
At this point in time, life doesn't seem like it was very ideal.
no, but it was, I enjoyed the freedom. We just played it by ear. I got moved to the graveyard shift at Denny's after some months there. And so we all became night owls, me and Bobby and all of our circle of friends that we socialized with.
At this point in time, how did Bobby treat you?
I thought he treated me well until I discovered that he wasn't being faithful.
And when in your relationship did you discover that?
We had gone, he was on the party line a lot and he talked to this woman frequently. He said they were just friends. They had been interested in each other in the past, but they decided they were just friends. It made me a little uncomfortable. He would talk to her a lot, actually, in my presence, so I figured he's doing it right in front of me. There's nothing going on there. So then one day we went to the library. That's where we went for our internet access, and he would email her a lot. And I had to go to work at the Purple Plum, and I dropped him off at his friend's house, and I went to go to the Purple Plum, and before going to the Purple Plum, I went back to the library, and I clicked, he had a Hotmail account, this is in 1998, so I clicked I don't know if they had different security things for Hotmail at that point, but I clicked the back button to see what was really going on with her because I had suspicions, and I found a whole bunch of love letters that he was writing her that were all contemporaneous with the time that we were together. So I printed them out and I called in sick for work because I was not well emotionally, and I drove back out to his friend's house, and I didn't want to create a scene of drama, so I just said, "Can I talk to you?" And so we went into the bathroom, and I pulled them out of my pocket and handed them to him, and he opened them up and read them, and he kind of felt like shocked.
Kind of glossed over it a little bit. When you saw these letters, how did it make you feel?
It didn't make me feel good. He was very loving and poetic with this person, and I could tell he had real feelings for her, and I don't know, I guess I felt jealous a little bit, but my heart was pounding. I just felt very deceived. I forgot to mention one of the things I did before I went to the house is I drove back out to Montague and I took all of my belongings out of his room and put them in my car, and decided I was going to move out and in with my grandmother. So that's when I went back to his house and confronted him with those.
Okay.
Or I mean, back to the friend's house, sorry.
You mentioned that he was this woman, whoever it was that he was corresponding with, that he was treating her in a very loving, poetic way.
Yes.
It leads to the implication, anyway, that he wasn't that way to you.
He was initially, but I don't know, I guess we had just sort of gotten comfortable around each other, and we weren't fighting or anything. We were just kind of, I don't know, I don't really know how to explain it. He was still loving toward me, but it seemed like he was going out of his way to really court her, whereas I was already, in the bag, so to speak.
You were already, what was that?
Just like he didn't have to court me, I was already with him. Does that make sense?
Okay, yes. Was Bobby ever physically abusive towards you?
There was one time where we had a fight. Trying to think, I think this was in 99. We had broken up and got back together a few times. I broke up with him, obviously, after that incident, and then he somehow, it's a long story, but he convinced me to stay, so I stayed and put all my things back, and he promised he wouldn't have contact with her anymore. But we broke up a few more times and then got back together, and at one point, I had moved out of his house and I was living with another woman, and it wasn't far from his house. It was like 2 blocks. And in Montague, there's a lot of fields. We could see each other's houses from there, sort of. And so I was advised over and over to get away from him because he's not healthy. But, my heart was, I still cared about him. So one day he came over to the house like he always did, and we were hanging out. And I don't remember how, but an argument started, and
Objection to publications.
Sustained.
When was this?
this was sometime in 1999. I think it was in the fall, early fall, like September, maybe even August, but I think it was around sometime in the early fall.
Okay. And he was at the home. Was he physical with you at this acquaintance's home?
Yes, our argument escalated, and he approached me and spun me around, and he was very much into martial arts, so he had some kind of hold. I guess it was called a stranglehold. So he started strangling me, and just for a few seconds, and then he let go. I almost passed out. I fell on my knees, and it kind of made me upset because he'd never done that before. So I got up. He started walking away. I got up, and I said something to him like, what did I say? Something to the effect, details about how they would die. And at that point, the argument escalated again, and he attacked me again. I don't know how, he jumped on me, and at that point I was trying to get to the phone to call 911, and he got my arm in some kind of lock and was putting pressure on my forearm, and I thought he might break it, because that seemed to be what the goal was. So I managed to grab the phone and I called 911, and he grabbed it out of my hand and hung up, and I was crying, and he kept telling me to shut up because they were going to call back. So he was right. The phone rang and he answered, and he gave the operator an excuse, like said my girlfriend was trying to program 911 into the speed dial and accidentally called it.
This happened, and then you got back together with him, right? Or you didn't really break up? This happened in
This was really, I'm sorry, this was really toward the end of our relationship. We still, this was really toward the end. It didn't happen. We didn't stay together much longer after that.
But you did stay together after that, right?
We continued to hang out. He met a friend that he had known prior to. His name was Matt, and he moved in with Matt. And this was in...
Let me ask you this. Why did you stay together with him after this incident?
Well, I don't know that we were still together, but he would still come over to the house where I lived. And it was just a nicer place to hang out than his. And I just continued to hang out with him in that regard.
Why would you hang out with him in that regard?
Well, the physical incident that occurred that day, those two things were isolated, and during all the years that I'd known him, that had never happened before. So I just didn't think that it was something, a pattern of his, or that would continue.
Did you ever engage in sexual behavior with him after this incident?
I don't remember, maybe once or twice. I don't remember, honestly.
And why was that okay with you after this incident?
I still loved him.
You mentioned a point in time when Bobby moved in with an individual named Matt.
Yes.
Okay. And I believe you were talking about how at the end of your relationship with Bobby, you moved into your grandparents' home, correct?
Yes. I moved out of that woman's house and into my grandmother's house.
And what city is your grandmother's house located?
Wairika.
And did you live there just with your grandmother, or was anyone else living there?
My grandfather also lived there, and their dog, Ringo.
Were you close to your grandparents? How was your relationship with them?
I felt close to my grandparents, not like lovey-dovey close, but they're very down-to-earth people. Well, my grandmother is very down-to-earth, and I can just tell her anything, and it doesn't really faze her.
Why didn't you move back in with your parents?
Well, I didn't want to go back to that environment. We got along very well after I moved out, and I wanted to keep it that way.
Okay. Tell us about your life after you moved back to your grandparents' home. Are you still working at Denny's? Do you go back to school? Just kind of describe your life for us.
Yes, after that incident occurred with Bobby, I had worked at Denny's for about a year at that point, and if you're a full-time employee at Denny's, or I think a minimum of like 32 hours a week, you get vacation benefits, and so I decided to use that time to spend away from him, and I flew back to Costa Rica for a week and a half.
And am I correct in assuming that was to spend time with Victor?
No, he didn't live in the house anymore. I stayed with the same family, but he had moved out and moved on.
So you spent about a week and a half, it sounds like, with Victor's family, not with him,
Yes.
and kind of assessing your life, is that?
Yeah, I
fair
spent
to
a lot
say?
of time just reflecting and healing from that, and I felt in a lot better place by the time I came back. I did see Victor 3 days before I flew back. So he took me out to dinner, and that was it, and then drove me to the airport.
When you say healing from that, what are you talking about? Healing from the relationship with Bobby?
Yes, because we kept going back, and I kept hearing about incidents where he was trying to hook up with other girls, but then he would deny it, and I didn't see anything, so there was just a lot of turmoil. We were arguing still, and then the physical incident that happened there, and I needed to just remove myself from the situation so that I could allow my heart to move on a little, and so that break from him, I thought, had helped me a lot.
So at some point in time, you were in love with Bobby, right?
Yes, very much. A lot more than I was Victor. Bobby was like my first true love.
Okay. So once you have spent some time in Costa Rica and you've, I guess, used your vacation time at Denny's, you come back to Wairika, I presume?
Yes, I did.
And how do you proceed in your life?
I went back to work, and I don't know if he was watching the restaurant, but the first day back, I was there. I went into the back of the restaurant to get something, and I came back out, and he was sitting at the counter.
He being who?
Bobby.
Okay.
He just had his face in his hands, and he has really beautiful eyes, and he was looking at me with these eyes, these puppy dog eyes, and I stopped, and I was kind of shocked. I felt stronger emotionally, not as weak, but I was coming up on my half-hour break, so I said, just wait a few minutes, and we'll go outside and talk. So I went outside, and we ended up talking for a long time. I mean, we rounded the corner and then hugged, and it was emotional and that kind of thing.
Okay. But was that the last time you saw Bobby?
No,
Okay. Did you continue in a relationship with him after that?
we decided we were going to continue a relationship, but we weren't getting along very well.
And I use the word relationship. Are we talking about friendship or a romantic relationship?
Romantic.
Did that also mean sexual?
It would have meant that. I don't really remember, but yeah, it would have meant that.
Okay. So why at this point in time were you still open to the idea of a romantic and potentially sexual relationship with a man who had choked you and thrown you down as you described?
Well, like I said, I considered those incidents isolated and not a pattern of his, and I still loved him, and he still loved me, and I didn't want to hurt him, and I didn't want to I don't, it just, it just felt natural. I'd been with him for some years. He was my first love. Being with him, whether it was good or bad, it just felt natural, and it was what I was accustomed to.
Okay. So at what point in time then do you decide, you said you and Bobby explored this and decided it wasn't for the best? When does that take place?
There was sort of a turning point in my mind. Well, Costa Rica was like a good starting point where I thought I'd moved on. If I hadn't seen him again, I think I would have been okay as far as never seeing him again. But I was weak when he came back, and so he sort of picked up again briefly. He moved to Medford, Oregon shortly thereafter. It's about 50 miles north of Wairika. And he moved in with Matt. And I would go up there and visit Bobby, and we'd hang out, and it seemed like once Bobby got on his feet, he didn't really want anything to do with me. And so it hurt my feelings, I guess, because he had kind of won me back and I was helping him. But then when he got on his feet, he was kind of mean.
What do you mean you were helping him?
Well, I always helped him out until he was able to get it. He finally got a job when he moved to Medford. There was a woman he knew that was a notary public that grew up with him in school. So she was able to say this is really who he is, so he could get identification. We finally figured that out, and so.
Let me interrupt you. I want to make sure we're clear here. Even after the incident, that what you were describing as a isolated incident of violence, even after the point in time when you find letters that are evidence that he's being unfaithful with you, and you come back from Costa Rica, you're going to move on, you've decided a romantic relationship isn't going to work, are we to understand that you're still supporting him financially as well? Or helping him?
I think that was a little bit out of order, but I did continue to help him. When I found out about the love letters, he promised to cut ties with her and not have any contact with her anymore. And it wasn't physical, it was online only. She lived in Louisiana. And I think he was still talking to her, but he promised me, you'll never have to see me talking to her. So it was implied that he might talk to her, but he'll never do it in my presence. So it was kind of strange. But, and then again, the physical incident was isolated. So, if he needed clothing, I didn't like buy him a whole wardrobe. I didn't have that kind of income. But if he needed a few shirts or something, he was really into South Park. So he saw these South Park t-shirts one time and he wanted those. So I bought them, sweatshirt, jeans, that kind of thing. Just some kind of clothing for him because his parents weren't able to provide that at that point. They were in a rest home.
Okay. And you said at this point in time, Bobby was living in Medford, Oregon with an individual named Matt, right?
Yes.
Okay. And just so we can get a sense of where this is compared to Wairika, could you describe for us where Medford is compared to Wairika?
Yes, it's on Interstate 5, just like Wairika. It's over the border. It's about an hour drive, I think 50 miles, but it takes about an hour to get there depending on traffic.
Okay.
And the weather.
And certainly not asking for population estimates, but is this a bigger town than Wairika?
It's a bigger town, not nearly as big as this area. It's very tiny in comparison, but it's much bigger than Wairika.
And you made trips up to Medford to see Bobby, is that right?
Yes, I would come up there on the weekend and stay. Bobby had a futon. They had kind of a studio, so Matt slept in his own bed and Bobby and I had a futon. And we would hang out on the weekends and go out and do things.
Okay. And how many of these trips can you say? I mean, was this something you did every weekend? How frequently did you go up to spend time with Bobby?
I went up several times, but that period of our relationship was short-lived. So that didn't happen often. I mean, very extensively.
Okay. And this person, Matt, that he was roommates with, had you known Matt prior to these trips up to Medford?
No.
And does Matt have a last name?
McCartney.
Did you ever develop any sort of friendship or relationship with him?
Yes, we became friends around the time I think he kind of noticed how Bobby was treating me, and it felt good to have somebody else kind of see my side of it. He wasn't attacking Bobby by any means, like saying, hey, you should be this way or that. But it just, I came up there one weekend to visit, and another girl came to visit Matt, and it was a real eye-opener because I saw how Matt was treating her, and he was very chivalrous and very polite, and he was a gentleman, and he just treated her with a lot of respect. And that's not something I had received, but I've seen it on TV and that kind of thing. So it was just jarring to see that, and then consider my relationship. So,
Well, let me ask you this. You said that was surprising for you to see, right?
yes,
And that is in a way that you experienced Bobby treating you. Is that right?
no, yes, that's right.
But you lived with your parents for 17 years, the first 17 years of your life, right?
Yes.
Did you not see your father treat your mother in this way? Did they treat each other in a different manner?
When I was young, my father was very affectionate with my mom. I've seen them kiss, I've seen them embrace. If there's a beautiful woman on TV and we're all sitting around watching it, he'll say she's not as pretty as your mom. Or, he put her on a sort of a pedestal, sort of. But then there were times when they would argue and fight, things like that.
You say argue and fight. What does that mean?
Not physical. They would sometimes. He would say something. My dad's very sarcastic and he thinks he's funny. And sometimes he is. But he can be very uncouth sometimes. And so when things would come out of his mouth, my mom would just smack him on the arm. And he would smack her back, kind of as a way to say, don't do that. And then she would be offended by that, so she would smack him back, and then he'd smack her even harder, and then she would give up. But it was just on the arm. But, that's the only time I ever saw them be physical at all.
Did you know, how did your father treat your mother? Was he degrading to her? Did he criticize her?
I can't recall specific incidents, but that's very much my dad. He's very negative. He's very critical. He's very gossipy.
Very, what was that?
I don't know if that's a word, gossipy. He gossips a lot about people
Okay.
behind their back. He talks about them. So, he'll say things about, now we talk on the phone now, and he'll say things about my mom sometimes, or sometimes they have complaints about each other, but, they're still loyal to each other.
Well, what do you mean things he would say about your mom? What things would he complain about with your mother? Goes to modeling behavior.
Approach. May continue.
Without telling me specifically what he said, was there certain subject matters that your dad would degrade your mother regarding?
One I recall specifically is my mother used to be very thin, and I think she's like a size 10 now, I would guess. He used to put up photos of her on the refrigerator when she was thinner, and he would make comments about her weight gain. And he would put little things like that around the house to remind her that he would prefer her with less weight, things like that. So I don't know how that affected her, but that was pretty constant. If somebody was crossing the crosswalk that was overweight, he would yell at them, and I won't say what he said, but I don't know, things like that.
Okay. But you said your mother would just simply, you said something to the effect, you learned they were always loyal to each other.
Yes.
Your mom was always loyal to your dad. What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Well, my parents weren't the kind where if one said no, you couldn't run to the other and have a different answer. Maybe if they weren't aware of the other, of their spouse's answer, but they were very united. If we were fighting, it didn't matter the points of the argument. My dad would side with my mom, or my mom would side with my dad at all times. So they were like one unit. They were very united. They're very loyal, and I think when I was younger, I think I heard my mom mention the word divorce one time, and that really like shook me, because I thought it just didn't seem, I couldn't imagine a world where my parents weren't married. And so they're still married today. I mean, even through bad times, they're still together. They still love each other.
Well, I should have been more clear in my question. You talked about loyalty as parents and backing each other up and that sort of thing. But what I was really asking about is in terms of the loyalty of the relationship. Sounds like from what you're telling us, your mom put up with a fair amount and remained loyal to your dad. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes. Yeah, they're very loyal. They're still married. They've been married about 33 and a half years. My grandparents are married. There's not a very high divorce rate in my family. So they're still together.
Okay. We were talking about this different way. Matt McCartney was treating a female, I guess it was his girlfriend or someone he was dating. Is that correct?
I think it's somebody he had met online, or somehow. She lived in Crescent City. And she just came out for the weekend the same time I came out to see Bobby. And nothing ever really progressed with that. They didn't start dating or anything like that. They just hung out for the weekend, and I just saw how he was treating her.
Okay. Tell me how things then progressed in your life. Did you just keep working? Did your life change at all?
I wanted to work in an environment where I could earn a little bit more money. I needed a new car. There were different kinds of bills coming in at this point. And Medford is a town that has a lot more restaurants, a lot more business, that kind of thing. So as I got to know Matt and Bobby, Matt's mother lives in Wairika too, so I met her and his sister, and we all sort of became friends. And Matt's dad lived in a city called Phoenix. It's in just south of Medford, and it's in Oregon. And he lived with his girlfriend, Matt's dad, and they had an extra. Well, they said just come crash on our couch until you can get a job and get your own place. So I crashed on Matt's dad's couch where he and his girlfriend lived for, I don't remember how long, maybe a month, and I got a job at Applebee's and began to work there.
Okay. So did you then move out of your grandparents' house and move to Medford? Just tell us about that.
Yes. Right around the time I moved to Medford, Bobby and I stopped talking. I was hanging out with him and his sister and her son. And they were renting a house right across the street from my parents' house. So I was over there hanging out with them, and Bobby came by and saw Matt and I and Kiowa, who was his nephew. We were all in the front yard. We were playing with, they're called Dworkins, and they're just wooden swords just to practice form and things like that. And Matt was into martial arts also. So he was teaching me some things and teaching Kiowa some things, and Bobby came around the corner and saw us all like in formation or just hanging out and having fun, and he got really upset and he walked away. And I think Matt tried to talk to him. He didn't want to talk to either of us. And at that point, things just really stopped between Bobby and I. We stopped talking. We stopped communicating. I think he moved out of Matt's studio, and I didn't see or hear from him again.
Okay. Where were you? You mentioned crashing on Matt's father's couch,
Yes.
right? And Matt's father had a girlfriend that he lived with in this home.
Yes.
Okay. Once you got a job and got settled, in Medford, where did you wind up living?
About, let's see, after Bobby and I stopped talking, Matt and I began to hang out more, and we developed feelings for each other. And so about a month, maybe 5 weeks went by, and Matt moved out of his studio apartment and got an apartment. And at that point, I went to live with him there, and I moved out of his dad's house, and we rented a one-bedroom apartment in Medford.
And when was this?
I would say at this point it was early 2000, I think.
Okay, and at this point in time, Matt McCartney is your boyfriend?
Yes. Well, I don't remember us making it official, but we became romantic, and then we were boyfriend, girlfriend.
Okay. Judge, this might be a good time.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow morning, 10:30, please remember the admonition. Have a nice evening. You are excused.